All right.
I think that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Right on time. I like to be about 5 minutes. So, welcome to Should I Self-Publish or Seek Traditional Publishing? It's a big question. It's a small question on the screen, but it's a really big question when you actually consider all the variables. I've had the opportunity, I'll introduce myself a little bit, to work on both sides. So I'm a full-time author, ghostwriter, and editor. I've been doing that for the last 3.5 years. I've worked on a number of books, have a number of my own, which I guess I could show you my current Amazon page. I can show you the, if I can remember the year, so Gospel According to Breaking Bad is the first one I did, just because I thought it would be fun to write, and it was. That was self-published. I wrote that while I had a full-time job, different full-time job. Let's see, I think after that, when I started working full-time for myself, co-wrote this book, Stuck, which is about forgiveness, and then Mr. and Mrs., which is about marriage. Those were co-written with a couple of pastors. And then when I got serious about my editing business, I did Don't Fear the Reaper, which I have 2 copies of. If anybody's interested, you can get it for $5, because when you have a book, you start selling books all the time as much as you can. But that's about kind of what you need to know about working with a freelance editor. And then I'm trying to remember I always forget the years because they go by quickly. I've self-published the Spanish edition of the Gospel According to Breaking Bad just because I wanted to see what that process was like. I did not translate it. I hired somebody to do that. And there's an audiobook version of the Breaking Bad book too. And then the 2 most recent are really like, I don't know, they mean a lot to me, maybe more than the first book I worked on. Sins of the Five Fathers, my uncle wrote this mystery novel. He passed away a couple years ago. He wasn't able to get that book out, so I self-published it on his behalf. I think it's a great book. And then The Father Effect was traditionally published, came out in October. I was the co-writer on that, so I got to learn a lot about the traditional process through working on that. So that's my really quick history. I'd be glad. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of those things as we go through this. And then my last part of the introduction, you always want to endear sympathy when you start your book. So I'm going to show you the reason why I do this. He's my little boy, and he's 2.5, and he's awesome. And yeah, I just like to show that because it makes me happy and gets everybody happy. So now I want to meet all of you, and let's start with Sherry. Am I saying it right, Sherry? Sherry and I know each other. You've been to, which one did you go to? The self-editing. So I also do a self-editing seminar for Writing Workshop Styles, and Sherry's been to it, Trevor's been to it. Anybody else?
It was awesome, by the way.
Oh, thank you. And Sherry and I have emailed about her book and her work, and she's got a pretty incredible story, and I don't want you to share all of it because we got to be quick. We have to move quick. Let me reiterate that too. We have to move quick through this stuff. I would say before we do introductions, just so I don't forget this, if you have questions, write them down, because I'm hoping at the end of this we'll have 30 minutes or more to talk about these questions. But I don't really want to interject while we're going through all this material. I kind of want you to have all the material first, and then we'll ask the questions, because I may answer that question eventually.
So you want me to give a quick synopsis?
You can, yeah. I want to know. So we're going to go around the room. I want to know your name, and right now, just your name and your genre. And then if you are working on something currently, tell us the very, basics of it. So Sherry.
I'm Sherry Bauer. I live in Arlington, Texas, and I am writing a memoir. I've been working on it for, I hate to say how long, but many years. It's a work in progress. It is about my life as a wife of a death row inmate who was falsely accused of a crime, convicted, spent 32 years on death row, and was executed 2 years ago. So it's a story about that. It's not so much about trying to write the justice system, but just to answer the questions and tell about how we got through that time.
Thank you.
I'm Kathy Woodyard. I'm from McKinney, and I'm pivoting at writing. I'm playing with the children's book right now, picture book, but I'm in the early stages of just exploring.
I'm Trevor Slansky. I live up in Allen, Texas. I write young adult fiction. Currently, I'm finishing up my book Soul Catcher, which is a mix of religion, mythology, and folklore, all set in kind of a modern-day setting. And that's about it.
I'm Doug. I'm with Trevor.
I'm Laura. I am currently writing a women's fiction / adventure story. That seems to be what I'm really good at. I have written a short story in the past that I self-published on Amazon, and that's where I'm at, just moving forward.
My name is Jeff. I'm from Rochester, Minnesota. We're down here for our winter vacation. I'm kind of a short story guy. I have written bigger stuff. I get into that nano, which is always fun to do every year. I think I've written every year for the last 10 years. So. But my biggest problem in this whole scheme of things is doing something with it. I've got stacks and stacks of stuff, but the next step is to figure out a way to, not figure out a way, but just get it moving.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to say that, but
Yeah, no, that's good.
the creative part so far is fun enough.
Yeah, but what's next?
Yeah.
My name's Jill, and I'm just a supporter.
Great.
My name is Chaz Blankenship. I got my bachelor's in creative writing from Stephen F. Austin State a couple years ago. My big project is my thesis from there. It's an experimental science fiction novel. It's kind of told from the perspective of an artificial intelligence, and it kind of gets into metafiction and all sorts of crazy stuff, like, I guess a good frame of reference is House of Leaves, Mark Danielewski, like typography and things like that. So, and in the process of revising it and ready to publish, it's being work.
Nice.
I'm Casey Lassiter. I live in Edgewood, which is Nowheresville east. There's literally nothing there. And I've written off and on probably all my life. I kind of fell away. I have 4 kids, and they are 16, 14, 12, and 8. So I've kind of been mom for a while, and I would like to get back into what I enjoy.
I'm Lindsay. Write fiction. I go to Dawson Seminary, and as my grad capstone project, I have to put together a book. So that'll be next May. I'm hoping to be done, but then this I think might be helpful to see, is there a future for it, or is it just gonna kind of sit in a Word document?
So if you see me texting, it's because everybody say hi to Joy. Wave to Joy.
Joy.
Joy was actually going to join us in person, but she has a cold, and she was kind enough to say, I'm going to stay here and not
Thank you,
everybody say
Joy.
that. Thank you very much. So Joy is emailing me because we don't have like a fancy chat thing. It's funny, I should just say, Joy, we don't have any chat. Just email me if you have a question. But I'm going to consider that anyways, in case. So if I'm checking that, I'm not like checking out, just so you know. Awesome. So now we're going to get to like the I don't know, the anonymous interactive part. And partially just because this is fun, partially because it allows Joy and any of the other live streamers to join in. So this is the website I want you to go to right now. pollev.com/BlakeAtwood292. I did not get to pick that because I opted for the free version. Oh, let me tell you about Joy while you're doing that. That's good. Thank you, Joy, for sending that in. Because she did her intro too. She's co-authored a book with Terry Goodman, and she has completed her first women's fiction book, and she's seeking an agent for publishing. Awesome. That's good. So let me know when you have that website up. I want to see if anything comes up yet.
Yeah, that's the question.
That's awesome. This is the first time I've used this, so.
I don't know if I did it right.
Oh, here, just copy that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mine didn't come up.
No, it just needs to be
We're doing www.
in the
Oh, okay.
yeah, in that field.
You're gonna type it in
That's what you want.
here.
You're good.
That's fine.
What is this?
Oh, just put in your email address. This is granting you access to the Wi-Fi network.
Thank you.
No problem.
I'm gonna have to pay Trevor like a tech support.
The unofficial helper.
Yeah.
Certificate for the.
should have
they
known
get
to
used
ask
to
you
it.
because I didn't like it.
And then
You weren't
connect,
fresh.
hit
It's like,
agree.
she's like, no, this is how you do it, you know.
You want us to answer this question right now?
I am second.
Completely understand.
And that's why I made you pick
It's
only
nice to
between
have you
two.
nearby.
It's me, it's not very nice,
I
but,
know.
okay. So yeah, wait on answering the question until the screen pops up. So is everybody on it? We're all good? That's awesome. And I'm gonna try to have us take breaks every hour, just so you know, we're not stuck in here, but it'll be like a 5-minute
I
break.
don't think you're on it. It needs to look like this.
Trevor to the rest.
Come on, Trevor. Just pull your chair up over your nose. Sorry, I'm just trying to help. I don't mean to
No,
be
you're right.
intrusive.
Now, let's see, can you type that whole thing in there?
And you'll want to keep this URL up the whole time. Hi.
That one's it. Oh,
Are you a He's our tech support. Unofficial.
Yeah. What's your name?
Peggy.
Hi, Peggy.
Hi. Sorry, Billy, that came from the little
Okay.
half an hour ago.
No, we just need to pull it up. Okay.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you, Trevor. Well, Peggy, I've asked everybody to go to this website. You should get logged on. This is how we're going to answer a few questions. And it really gives a good way to see where we're all at. I think it'll be interesting. I hope so, at least. And just tell me when you're ready, Peggy.
About 1 minute.
Yeah. So I guess while we're waiting, I'm curious how you all learned about writing workshops, Dallas.
How do I get on the internet so they're not?
Sure.
Trevor wants his money back. Or we're gonna pass it
I'll
on.
put
Yeah,
credit on the PowerPoint.
exactly.
I've learned because I'm a writer's workshop and then art house.
Oh, yeah.
So I get two emails.
Yeah. Yeah, you get reminded all over.
All over.
Awesome.
That's how.
Cool. Anybody else?
Internet search, just.
Nice. That's awesome.
You saw a post for it on social media.
Good.
I think I got an email from the Dallas workshop with a list. They have a list, they email me once a month of all the classes available in my area.
Uh-huh.
And you were on the list for February.
Nice.
It comes from Tex Thompson, is it Thompson?
Yeah. That's Word, the writers' organizations around Dallas, I think, because she's involved in so.
WordFest.
She's involved in so. Yeah.
She's got it. She
Word is a
sends
really
a-
great organization because they aggregate North Texas writers groups.
You're doing a class with her?
I am. She's. I'm also
I'm
the.
your publicist.
Yeah, I know. You just bring up the right questions at the right time. You're like, hey, I got a question. So Tex is doing a class on self-promotion this Wednesday up in Plano for the Nonfiction Authors Association, which I co-lead as well. So, and it's free to first-timers. That's just a pitch. Joy says it's not working for her, which is unfortunate. Oh, because she left out the.
And then I Googled you to make sure, I'm kidding, I knew you were good at it.
No, I think that's very prudent of you. Because like if you're looking for an agent, you should Google that agent.
Well, they're Googling me, so.
That's right. Okay, I'm gonna venture forward. Hopefully Peggy can get there. Oh, so we've had some people already answer, which is good. So the fun thing about, let's see,
Do you want all
live
of us to
update.
answer?
So yes, go
You
ahead
want
and
us to
answer this
answer
one.
now?
Yeah. Oh, you just have to hit it once. You're good.
Oh, okay.
So once it has the number next to it, that means you've answered. And then you don't have to hit anything else after that, because the next time I ask a question, next time a question is on the screen that I want you to answer, that's going to update automatically. It's pretty nifty.
Oh, it's not letting me. It's okay, Drew, I have to. You'll be able to.
My question is, how does it have 101% of it?
Because I hit the wrong button.
Oh, this is.
No, you're good. You've answered. Once it has the
It's my
number.
fault.
No, it's all good. It was
It's the
like,
very indecisive
yeah.
person.
Very detail-oriented.
there's,
So what do
there's
you
someone
want?
watching that's just click
It's
entering. You
going
can only
back.
choose one, click it both ways.
Yeah.
So I screwed up the numbers, so.
That's it.
Okay. I can't answer because I don't know.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's why you're here. Hopefully. So, I mean, we are kind of 50-50. Which I don't have much to say about that. I just wanted to kind of figure out where we're at. And there is a lot of, I think there's a lot of confusion about which route to go. And before I kind of worked in this world for a few years, I was the same way. I actually started out like, when I heard about self-publishing, I was like, this is the only thing anybody should ever do because it's awesome, even though it's a lot of work. There are a lot of benefits that we're going to talk about. But then over the course of working with different people, seeing a bunch of different kinds of projects, I came to a more middle of the road. I was like, there are so many variables to consider as to which one is really going to be best for you. So that's what we're going to talk about. So what this seminar isn't. Experience has shown me, this is from Jane Friedman's Publishing 101, which I totally recommend because I quote her a lot. I recommend her website a lot, janefriedman.com. She is very knowledgeable. I've had the opportunity to meet her, ate lunch with her at a DFW con last year, which was really awesome. And she actually spoke to our nonfiction authors group last month via Skype, which was really fun. So she's super smart about publishing and writing. In her book, in the intro to Publishing 101, experience has shown me that prescriptive step-by-step advice sometimes offers a comfortable illusion that you can reach success systematically or by formula. Such advice, especially when simplified, bulleted, and listed, pushes aside the complexity, difficulty, and dilemma of what it means to undertake a writing life. I think that's so true. Like, it applies to what we're doing here today. Like, I'm not going to tell you this is what you have to do, because I don't know. My goal here is to present you with as much information as I can, so you can make the best choice for you. So this isn't going to be like, you know, step by step, here's what you have to do. Grab a drink. And then, the next thing that this seminar isn't, this isn't, hopefully, maybe, some of you are still looking, I guess, exploring what your next options should be. But you really shouldn't be at the point, necessarily, of seeking your publishing step if you're not happy with where your book is right now. Because really, like, the main thing to do beforehand is to get that book where you need it to be. And then worry yourself about publishing. So Jane also says, there are two things to ask yourself after you complete a manuscript or proposal. Is the book really done? Is it really the best you can make it? And have professionals, whether editors, agents, or published authors, encourage you because they see and know you are ready. Do you feel confident that it's ready to submit? Are you informed enough about the publishing business, that's why you're here today, to understand where to submit the work, how to submit the work, and what obstacles you might face? So, it's an important question to ask before you even start on this venture of like, should I self-publish or traditional publish? I think it's good. Maybe your manuscript isn't there yet, and I think it's good that you're getting all this information now. But make sure your book is ready for other people to read it, because you don't want that thing to appear on Amazon and start reading what people actually think about it with like 1 or 2 star reviews. It's not fun. What this seminar is, why we're here. 2 roads diverge to the wood. I don't know the rest of it, so don't ask me. So we have self-publishing path, way off into the trees, and a traditional publishing path. Very different. Ultimately, hopefully they lead to mountaintop experiences of, you know, thousands, millions of people reading your work. I thought this, I just randomly picked this picture because it's 2 roads, but I thought it was interesting that there are like houses over here, and there aren't really over here. Meaning like in traditional publishing, you kind of have to get past the gatekeepers. In self-publishing, you can just do whatever you want, which is, it's like the benefit and the con, which we're going to get into. Whew. Talk too fast sometimes. All right, so your screen should have updated, and you don't really have to see the answers here because you can see it on your screen. So I want you to answer this question. Right now we're going to talk about self-publishing in general, just so we all kind of have the same base to start from. So what do you think of self-publishing? It's a viable option for today's authors to publish their work, results in too many subpar books with bad editing and worse cover design. I appreciate that somebody chose that one. It's time-consuming, difficult, and costs too much. I don't know enough about it to answer this question. Joy, can you email me and let me know if it's working now for you?
Oh, Peggy?
No,
Joy's
Joy's
on
on camera on live stream.
I know he was looking that way.
Is it working for you?
I think so, I answered.
All right. And I can't tell when everybody's answered yet.
It's 100%.
Oh, because you're adding it?
Put the numbers together.
That's true. But will it always be 100%?
It's always
No,
100%.
it's shift if somebody adds, yeah.
No,
it'll always be
it always adds to 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
that's
when the first person to answer, the bar went up and it just said 100%.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
So I don't know what everybody's answered, but I'm just gonna, guess maybe, once it's stayed steady. All right, so most of us think it's a viable option, which I do too, even though I actually do think that it results in too many subpar books, and
Yes,
it's time consuming,
yes.
maybe not necessarily difficult, depending on how much work you want to do, which we're gonna talk about. And it doesn't actually cost too much, another thing we're gonna talk about. All right, next question. What do you think general readers think of self-publishing? I think we have a clear winner. Sorry about this. I think you are correct. That most people don't care if a book is self-published because, let's do this question. What's the last self-published book you've read?
Remember the name of it?
Yeah, you don't have to write the whole title if you don't want to.
It's not.
No Idea is my favorite book ever. It's great.
Because I don't pay attention to that.
I don't remember the title, but
That's me.
I don't remember.
No, that's okay.
To be honest, I didn't even know it was self-published until I got it about halfway through it, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I knew mine was.
Yeah. This is kind of confirming my
Definitely
bias.
knew mine was.
That for the most part we don't know. Sometimes there are telltale signs of a book being self-published, but For the most part, we don't know. Which is kind of, trying to nudge you just to saying that, I don't know, I get on Kindle, so should I? See? Yeah. I'm trying to nudge you to say that self-publishing is definitely a viable option these days. And we can talk a little bit about the history of that. Now we're actually going to talk about what's involved in self-publishing. Some of you may know none of this, some of you may know all of it, but this is a little intense. So this is excerpted from Shayla Raquel's pre-publishing checklist, which is an excellent resource. Shayla is actually a friend of mine, a very good editor. I'm gonna, after we get done, I'm gonna have a resource that I'm gonna email out that's gonna have all these links. So don't feel like you have to write them all down. I haven't created it yet, but I'm going to. So, this is really small now that I see it from here. Write the book. Could take you 6 months, could take you many years. That's step 1. Step 2, prepare a media kit. And this is all based on Shayla's list. So even step 2 has 10 steps to it. And she kind of knocks it out step by step, which is why this thing is so helpful. And you don't necessarily have to take notes because you can download her checklist. Step 3, purchase ISBN and barcode. 4, find, vet, and hire an editor. I actually do a talk about that process because even that process can take a while. 9 steps. We're not necessarily giving a timeline yet on this. Find your target audience. That's always a fun one. Set up social media, 10 plus steps, because you could be on like every social media platform you wanted to. Set up an email list. Email is actually very important these days, I would argue. Almost more important than social media in terms of engaging with your readers. 8, pre-marketing, step 1. Set a launch date, start a Facebook group, those kind of things. Research self-publishing platforms, and we'll talk about a few of those. Find, vet, and hire a book designer. I know a really good nonfiction book designer, just in case. I always like promoting her if you need one. Pre-marketing, step 2. Figure out your pricing, your promo products, I forget what that is. 8 steps. Step 12, publish on Kindle Direct, 12 steps. Set up your Amazon Author Central page, 6 steps. Publish on CreateSpace, 11 steps. Throw a launch party, physical launch party, or a virtual one. And then promote your book, 100 plus steps. Because you could do, there are so many things you could do to promote a book, it's overwhelming. The reason I list all that is because I want you to see how much work this is. Self-publishing is a lot of work. I can't remember if I included the quote in here. I think I did eventually, that self-publishing is like having a small part-time, maybe not even a part-time job. That's not the quote. Self-publishing is like running a small business. That's what I was looking for. Because so much work, if you really want to put out a quality product that people can't tell is self-published, that competes with traditionally published books, you got to do the work. That is one of the benefits and the drawbacks of self-publishing, because you have complete control, but that also means you have to do all the work, essentially. You can hire out some of that work, and that's another thing to talk about, but it really is a lot of work. Let's talk a little bit about Vanity Publishers and self-publishing companies, which always sounds funny to me, because like, if you're self-publishing, doesn't that mean yourself is doing the publishing? And, you know. Oh, I forgot about this. This was my favorite question. So what's your immediate, and I already ruined it because I gave you, I'm curious what your immediate reaction to the list was. And it's on your screen, what you can choose. I'm so happy just to put some gifts in there. That's what I get for not following my outline.
Oh my God, too. Oh, there we go. A huge amount of money.
That would be me. Is the huge not that?
Yeah, I'm somewhere in between the second and third one, typically. Shocked and confused.
That's one of my favorite chips.
Okay, so now we've had our fun. I like the nodding. Yeah, it's a lot of work. So let's talk about a few differences in self-publishing that you should probably know. difference between print on demand and, offset printing. Is anybody familiar with that term? Print on demand versus offset? So print on demand is less expensive up front. It's faster typically, both in terms of how quickly they can produce the book and how quickly they can get the book out. Storage and fulfillment is handled by someone else, which is always great, and stays in print longer, quote, in print. I put it in quotes because it really stays like as a digital file that can be printed whenever. And then like CreateSpace is a POD solution, POD for print on demand. Essentially that means like when you upload your book to CreateSpace, they're only going to print as many copies as either you sell or they think that you're going to sell. So that means that their margins are going to be a lot lower than if you went with offset printing. Offset printing is like you would go to a local printer and say, hey, I want to have 500 books made. So you would pay up front for 500 books that you would then have to sell to recoup your costs. So it's expensive up front, but let's say you're like a public speaker and you plan to sell a lot of your own books at the back of your venue and you know you can move these books. Maybe it makes more sense to purchase 1,000 or 50,000, however many, because the more you buy, the lower the cost per copy is. Typically like print on demand. So for instance, if I remember, I can buy this wholesale from Amazon for $3.41. So that's what it cost them to make this book. If I did offset printing, that could be like $1 or something. Maybe. I don't actually know because I've never considered offset printing because for me, that doesn't make sense. There are setup fees with offset printing. There are very few setup fees with CreateSpace. You get better customization. So I worked on a book that I thought about bringing, but I have one of the few things I collect is signed books. And I like signed books that I get from the authors that I worked with, so I didn't bring it because I'm just weird that way. But I think he did offset printing, and it's like nice hardback, almost like a cloth feel on the cover. Really nice paper. He did really nice packaging. It was nice. I was impressed by what he did, and he did offset, I'm pretty sure. But you have to do self-fulfillment. So you would purchase this from the offset printer, and then you have to ship it to whoever buys it. So an example of an offset printer is blurb.com, and then local publishers that you could contact to print it for you. From what I know, most people use print on demand just because it's easier to do. And then another thing about self-publishing, we have to talk about Vanity Publishers. If you're unfamiliar with what a Vanity Publisher is, a Vanity or subsidy publisher charges a fee to produce a book, or requires the author to buy something as a condition of publication, such as finished books or marketing services. As with traditional publishing, a Vanity or subsidy publisher contracts rights on an exclusive basis. It's kind of a scary word, exclusive basis, just remember that. But gatekeeping is minimal if it exists at all. So sometimes I think in a general audience, and even in writers, there's a conflation of self-publishing with vanity publishing. And this kind of comes out of before Amazon really came along and allowed us to upload books via Kindle, KDP.
Kindle Direct Publishing.
Thank you. It's totally blanking. Kindle Direct Publishing and CreateSpace. Your only option for self-publishing was pretty much these vanity publishers, where you would have to pay them pretty much an exorbitant fee to print your book and probably pay more for marketing. Shayla actually has a really nice rant about vanity publishers. And typically, if you have to pay somebody else a lot of money to get your book out there, I would say no. And we'll get into some more of that.
Do you have a couple of examples of names of publishers? Is that not what you like to do? I'm just so I can kind of figure out.
No, I know, and I'm of vanity publishers specifically, no.
Okay.
But we're going to talk about self-publishing services, which kind of skirt this line between vanity and self-publishing services, I think. So self-publishing services fall somewhere between vanity and subsidy publishing and true self-publishing. Unlike true self-publishing, writers are restricted to whatever publishing packages the service provides. Unlike vanity subsidy publishers, which like to pose as, quote, real publishers, self-publishing services are relatively transparent about what they are and what they do. Some of these examples of these self-publishing services are Author Solutions is a big company. It's kind of the big umbrella, and they have certain, I don't know what you would call it, under their name, Author House,
Sub-brands.
iUniverse, yeah, sub-brands, it's good. I have no idea how to say this one, Ex Libris, maybe that's how you say it. Westbo is another one. If you go to these companies' websites, you can see like, I should put like an example. You know, you can get editing services for X number of dollars. They will print so many numbers of your book for X number of dollars. It's kind of like this tiered thing of like, you could load up on all these things, and by the end you could pay $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. And I have.
Are those vanity or subsidy, or the ones you just named?
I know. Well, they're technically self-publishing services,
Okay.
but you know they are asking you for a sizable investment up front before anything else happens. And I have rarely heard of anybody who has had a good experience with those kinds of companies. And here's just more about it from Jane and from David Carnoy. I can't even say it, Carnoy of CNET. The cat's out of the bag when it comes to the quote value of the package services you get from a fee-based company. Take David Carnoy of CNET, for instance, who plainly says, buy as little as possible. And he's talking about self-publishing. Self-publishing outfits are in the game to make money. And since they're probably not going to sell a lot of your books, they make money by selling you services with nice margins. It's better to hire your own people and work directly with them. Ideally, you should be able to meet with an editor, copy editor, and graphic designer in person, and they all should have experience in book publishing. I really like that. I'm partial to that because I'm one of those editors. And what's really nice about, you know, meet with them in person, you can meet with them via video online, so they don't necessarily have to be local. And there's I would say a thriving industry of professionals like this, partially because I belong to that and been able to make a living at it for the last 3 years. I know other people. So like even if you asked me for help and I said either, you know, that's not my genre, I don't have time for it, I would likely either know somebody who could help you, or I would just send out the call to the people I know and say, this is what, somebody I know is looking for, so can you help?
I ask these because I'm being solicited
By those kind of companies?
by one, yeah, a couple of them.
Yeah.
And it's pretty attractive when you look at it, when you look at their,
Well, when you have to pay them?
no, I mean, it's attractive when you look at it and you don't know what you're doing. And so this helps to.
I mean, if you don't want to put in the work yourself and you have the budget for it, then maybe it's for you. But personally, I think the risk would be too great, in my opinion. And I've never worked with one of those. Let me put a disclaimer on that. I've never worked with a company like that, personally. Let's see. Let's talk about how much it actually costs to self-publish. This was taken from reedsy.com, R-E-E-D-S-Y, which is a good website for this kind of information.
What was that?
R-E-E-D-S-Y. And they do a bunch of different things. They base this on 10,000 quotes presented by 700 professionals one of the things they offer, you could go to their website and find an editor, and you could browse a whole long list of editors. So they compile this information based on the people in their collection, I guess. So I'll let you look at this briefly. And then I'm going to give you kind of a example cost once we look at the big, I would say the big three things that you absolutely need to pay. Either you need to pay somebody to do it, or you need to be really, really good. I would never recommend editing your own work. I'm an editor. I don't edit my own work, just because you're too close to it. So hopefully, and you realize that these are averages. The cost of editing is variable for a lot of different reasons, which you should come to the self-editing seminar if you want to learn why. So editing is a big thing. Cover design is a big thing. They say that $650 is an average cost. You should get a really, really nice cover design for that, I think. The friend I know, she charges about $500, I believe. And I think $500 is a pretty good estimate. And then the last thing is interior design. So what does the book look like on the inside? Because somebody has to make that. $830 is an average cost. To me, that seems a little high, but it also depends on like what kind of book you have. How long is it? How complex is it? You know, if it's just a novel, the novel's not going to be as complex as a nonfiction book that has lots of charts and tables and that kind of fun stuff. So if we put all that together, I'm going to use, I think I used a 60,000 word example. Just copy it. So if you can only, here's the thing too. Typically when you go through a traditional publisher, it may or may not go through a round of developmental editing, which is big picture stuff, which they could come back and say like, you know, I think you need to totally move section 1 to section 2, for example. Hopefully, you know, your manuscript's more well-formed by the time it gets to a publisher. And then it will go through copy editing, which is mostly grammatical stuff. Proofreading happens after the book has already been put into print or digital forms, because errors can be introduced in that process. So typically, when you go through traditional publisher, you may have developmental, but you will definitely have copy editing and proofreading. So if you're a self-publisher, if you want to be on par with traditional publishers, then you should do all three as well. But that gets really costly really fast. So what I typically recommend, and maybe because I'm totally biased because I'm a copy editor, mainly a developmental edit nonfiction, copy edit fiction and nonfiction. If that's all you can afford, do that one. Do copy editing. Try to get your story or your book as well crafted as you can, big picture wise, and then hire a copy editor. So the cost the average cost, based on the Reedsy survey, self-publishing a 60,000 word book while paying for copy editing, $1030, cover design of $650, and interior formatting of $830 would on average cost $2510. So at self-publishing, you can sometimes get away with, you know, maybe $1,000 up to $2,000. That's almost like a baseline number to create a book that is on par with traditional publishing. Just to give you, like, don't lock into that number, but hopefully that gives you kind of a guide as to how much it could cost.
Is that about what your experience said, or what did you?
I need to remember back on that. I mean, maybe $1,000 for the first book.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, well, see, here's the thing that I don't tell anybody, and it's about to go, like, on video. So I designed that cover,
Oh, okay.
which I never recommend doing unless you know what you're doing. I kind of regret doing that, but I did it because I didn't have the budget for it. Because I didn't want to invest, you know, $2,000 when I was, I don't know, I think I'd been married for 2 years, and I was like, hey, I want to put all this money that's probably not going to recoup its cost, you know? And that's like a legitimate consideration when you're self-publishing, is to think, how much can I afford to invest in this versus how much can I then, what's my return on investment? Which in some ways you can't know, because you can't know how many books you're going to sell, but there are other ways to make money off of your book.
Is this like print or just ebook?
Oh, that's a good question.
You wouldn't have had a cover or too. I mean,
Well, the cover, I would say this could be for both. Mostly because that cover design to me, from what I've experienced in working with other people, is a little high. And typically cover designers will throw in I shouldn't say they throw in, because typically the ebook cover is just the cover. There's no back cover for an ebook because there's no back of an ebook. And sometimes they'll do like, you know, give you both and maybe it's a little discounted rate. And then the interior formatting, there is a definite difference between formatting for print and formatting for digital. And so that could be more, or you could find somebody that gives you a discount. The hard thing about, to me, I wish there was like one organization that said, this is how much all this costs for everybody. This is the only thing you can charge. But because you're working with freelancers, they can charge across the board. So it's really on you. Again, it comes to the point of you have to do the work to vet like the copy editor and your cover designer and the interior formatter. So that means, either grilling them with questions or looking at their website for a long time, and really like not just looking at one person, but comparing, finding 3 to 7.
So I know you didn't want to do questions
All
on
right.
the fly, but so this is a 60,000 word book. It doesn't seem to me like cover design really would change very much if it was 30,000
Yes,
or 100,000.
Good point.
But interior formatting and copy editing, especially copy editing, is going to be
Yeah.
probably the bigger variable, right?
Yes, correct.
I think these are just good average numbers, and they're very in line with what I've found researching self-publishing websites also.
Good. Good to hear. Let's see. Can we get through this in 10 minutes? I think so. We're gonna try. So that's like a lot of information about self-publishing. We're gonna go to traditional publishing now. And we have a question. All right. What do you think of traditional publishing? You should have updated on your screen.
I wish.
I just realized that the first two answers are somewhat similar. So I'm just gonna-
You don't have, sell your soul as I went with my best choice.
I mean, it gives too much control away, right? Is that kind of what you mean?
Well,
Or do you mean something worse?
I don't really have an opinion, but the people I've run into quite a few traditional published authors who are very bitter and very angry.
At their publisher? Or
Yes.
just at,
Yes.
I mean, I guess at the publisher.
Yes, and so I'm trying not to listen to that. I'm trying to form my own opinion, but, ooh, these are some angry ladies.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I'm trying not to listen to that, so.
I think it's a lot like what's the song Piano Man? So I mean I'm sure I've heard plenty of horror stories about traditional, but I'm sure there are also plenty of legitimate options.
Yeah,
too.
so I'm trying to not listen to that.
That's good. So we have a question of legitimacy, then getting on the New York Times bestseller list, because who wouldn't? Or that it takes too long, gets too much control away, and then you don't know enough. All fair answers. It's an interesting split, I think. So next question, what do you think general readers think of traditional publishing? I should have like some Olympic theme music playing. It just evens out.
I'm thinking part of this might make a difference in the genre too.
Sure. Yeah.
But I'm sure
Yeah.
saturated, which is not doing, so that's why.
There's some people I'm not gonna.
Yeah, it's not.
I would be interested to ask general readers if they know about what
We
is
should do a
traditional.
poll on the streets, just like walk around with like flyers.
I don't think that many people know.
I don't think so either, unless you're kind of in the business, or you're seeking to learn. They don't care if it's traditional. Yeah. I agree with all that. Okay, this is kind of a mean question. Who is the publisher of the last traditionally published book you read?
That is me, because I don't know.
Not that I know the author. I might not know the author.
Probably me.
Yeah, I misspelled it.
We know what you meant.
And I used to not read those until I started writing, and then I started.
Yeah, it's weird how that happens. Me too. Like, I'll read acknowledgments now. I will read every name in acknowledgments just to see if, like, have I heard of this person? Do I know this? Like, what's my connection? I don't keep an eye on it. Yeah, so this goes with the last question I asked about self-publishing. Most people don't know. Most people don't care. Which, to me, means, could mean a lot of different things. That, if you self-publish or if you're traditional publish, it's what the book looks like, and what the story is about. Hopefully that sells it. There's a lot more variables, but
Now it's marketed.
how it's marketed. Yeah, it's good. So, if you are unfamiliar, there are the big five publishers: Hachette, HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, Macmillan, and Penguin Random House. What's funny is that up until just that moment, I wasn't sure if I grabbed the right image, because for a second I was like, are there 6 up there? Because there used to be 6, and Penguin and Random House, I think, were the most recent conjoined. And then what's interesting, so the Father Effect book is a Hachette book, but it's an imprint called Faithwords. And then I'm going to open this link. Well, I thought I was going to open this link. I just have to go here. So these 5, such a nice rock. How about that? It's over here. Come on. These 5 actually equal the 1,000. This is a really interesting list. So, and it can't even fit on here. So Penguin Random House has all these imprints. And actually, technically, these would be the imprints. And they're all, you know, like Faithwords does faith-based books. And so a lot of these imprints have different genres that they specialize in. So you can see Del Rey right there, which is a Penguin Random House imprint. And you can see, I mean, it's crazy how many there are. So even people who are reading some of these books wouldn't necessarily know that it's HarperCollins. And there are a ton.
So Zondervan is in there? Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, Zondervan is HarperCollins now. It got bought out, I don't even know how long, somewhat recently.
What about Thomas Nelson?
Yeah.
They use by Tommy?
Well, no, Tommy Nelson is the kids' version.
Oh.
And Thomas Nelson was, I think Thomas Nelson was bought by Zondervan, and then Zondervan was bought by, I don't actually remember. So, I just think that's a really fascinating look into, there's Faithwords, just how many imprints there are just based on these 5 traditional publishers.
It's almost like the phone companies, isn't it? Marketing companies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See if I get back
Well,
to
there's
where
many
we
different
were.
type of books, it would make sense that I would.
Now let's talk a bit.
Is it?
Okay, we'll try to get through this kind of fast so we can take a break. This is the traditional publishing path. The steps you have to take, and it's excerpted from Jane Friedman's Publishing 101, like most everything else here, because it's such a good book. Getting your book traditionally published is a step-by-step process of determining your genre or category of work, finding appropriate agents or publishers for your work. 3, preparing your submissions, materials, a query letter usually. 4, submitting your materials to agents or editors. So, compared to our self-publishing checklist, this seems really easy. There's only 4 steps. But that is kind of a lie. Because there are 4 steps, but these 4 steps take a really long time. I wrote some notes about each of these steps. Let me see if they will be helpful. So some of these are kind of just good to know. So because writing is so integral, let me say the writing itself is so integral to selling fiction and memoir. Novelists and memoirists must have written the entirety of their manuscript before approaching an agent. That is in comparison to if you're writing nonfiction, you usually only have to have written a couple of chapters because you're focusing on your book proposal. So that's a difference that you should know. And then when you're working on nonfiction that isn't memoir, your platform means a ton. And we'll talk a little bit about platform later. Platform doesn't mean as much when you're a novelist. Certainly it doesn't hurt.
Define what platform means exactly in the situation.
Oh my goodness. Jane actually has a really good definition of platform, so if she was here, she would tell you. So it's not necessarily just marketing. Let me try to, I should have like a go-to answer here. I would argue it's how you reach people by yourself.
Okay.
And that can be social media, that can be like maybe you do public speaking, that can be any of your connections. You know, how can you sell a book by yourself? And then you want to show the agent and the publisher, like, here's what I can do to help sell my book. That's your plan.
Okay, I get it.
It's your website.
Get a country western singer.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. You know, like if you're Garth Brooks and you put out a book, you're probably going to sell it. So the second step, finding agents and publishers requires a lot of work and a lot of patience. I'm going to show you a video later about that, which is kind of funny. And I'm going to include these links in the thing I'm going to send you later. So I'm going to talk about that later too. Sorry, I'm going to get to it. I'm just going to send you links about finding agents and publishers because I think we're going to get lost in the weeds. I guess one good thing to know is that you don't necessarily have to pitch an agent. You can also pitch non-Big Five publishers, which are also known as mid-size and small presses. These are like university presses. And there's a website I'm going to give you for that. So some of these smaller presses that aren't part of the Big Five, and even some of the Big Five with some of the smaller imprints, you can pitch them directly without an agent. But if you want to be like legitimately traditionally published, you need an agent. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, let's go to the next one. We'll talk about costs. Nothing but time and sweat. That's how much it costs you traditionally published. Because you don't necessarily have to invest anything in terms of money when you're seeking an agent. That isn't to include, I put an asterisk, I can never say that the first time. Asterisk. Get that cage. Because you may choose to attend a writing conference. That costs money. You may also choose to hire an editor yourself before you ever send it off to somebody else. That costs money. Those aren't things you necessarily have to do. I'm just talking about when you pitch an agent, that doesn't cost you anything. I keep like thinking of ways it could cost you. Because some websites may charge you to get information on agents. You may have to buy I think the writers, I forget what it's called, Writer's Guide to Literary Agents. So sometimes there are like these ancillary costs. But compared to like self-publishing, shelling out $2,000, you don't have to do that for seeking a traditional publisher.
Just cost your percentage, doesn't it?
Yeah, if any agent or publisher asks you to pay them, don't. That is not, so far I haven't heard any stories like that, at least with people I've worked with. But an agent does not take money up front from you. If they're asking you to pay them, that's not a reputable agent. And we're going to talk a little bit about what the agent's cut is and how they actually do get paid. And then same for a publisher, just run away. All right. I think we can stop now and take a break. So take about 5 minutes, hit the bathroom if you want to, grab a drink, and then get back in here at 4:08, 4:09, 4:10. I'm going to do the same thing. And don't forget the number, 3655, because I forgot it last time I did this.
So are you supportive of your son being a creative soul?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's nice.
I think 18-year-old kid who puts over a manuscript together, he's ready to publish it and has all these plans and stuff.
That's awesome.
And he's going to go be attending college next year, majoring in creative writing, English creative writing.
Does he know where he's gonna go?
He's been, he's been accepted at 4 different schools, but he's going to go to Austin College up in Sherman, Texas. And they have a 5-year program that allows him to get his master's in education
At the
in
same
5
time?
years at the same time.
That's
So,
great.
Yeah.
That's nice. I like that.
My wife was with him at the last conference, but she was really busy today, so I came to this one. I've actually done a whole lot of this research online.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, so what he's talking about is very much in line with the stuff that I've seen. So I think it's good advice, good information.
Yeah, I only self-published a short story, and my husband did all of the technical stuff because I can't do that. And I mean, it didn't really cost us anything, and it was, I did have it professionally edited and stuff, so I'm glad I did that. But I mean, he does all that technical stuff. But I mean, I just did it just to see if I could do it.
I think.
And
I mean,
I like.
you know, for someone like Trevor, I mean, so you start thinking about, you know, he was talking about earlier, like the costs and stuff. I mean, the self-publishing with the print on demand, the higher per unit cost versus, you know, going to an offset printing. You start thinking about how many hundreds or thousands of copies of the book you'd have to sell to make up that difference and stuff. And I think for a first novel, for him and for our case, that it makes a lot more sense to do the self-published print on demand options. But I have an aunt and uncle who are in the print industry, so I'm going to talk to them about getting offset print quotes as well, just to see.
Yeah, that's nice. It's really nice.
No, I was just telling her that, you know.
My oldest son is a
Print on
creative.
demand makes
My oldest son is a creative soul, but he's in denial.
Get my
And
stuff that I
he's
answered.
just like me, and I'm like, listen, when you're
Seriously,
40 years
I had a
old
good experience
and
with
you're
policy also.
shoehorned into a corporate job
I mean,
that you're
as far
miserable
as
at, you're gonna have a complete
the
breakdown.
You know, I'm 18.
Just
I've got-
embrace it,
I
go
got
with it.
time before I go to college, and I'll be busy with making sure that goes well. I want to try it, you know?
Take your shot.
Yeah,
Take your
that's
shot.
what I'm saying.
And I told him that. I said, I can tell you what's gonna happen, because that's what happened to me. You're gonna be 40 years old, and you're gonna be just a miserable person, particularly at your job, and you're not gonna know why. It's just because you're repressing down your creative self. I know I sound kooky.
No, I know what you mean. Like,
It's not
it
gonna
took me a
work.
long time to really
Embrace
figure out
it.
the difference of the fact that I'm like a
Like I know,
writer
there's like
too.
evangelism and stuff being on
Yeah.
so I was like, this is like, okay, fascinating.
I mean,
I have a friend who lives in the
What
UK,
was
who's
the,
fantastic
so you watched the
artist.
series
And
and
I'm
just
constantly
like,
like,
or-
I'm in a collaborative writing project with her. She does artwork for a long time, and she just like does herself. It's really great. And I'm like,
What's funny,
you should,
though, we used to,
well, you should do stuff like that, you know?
Dave,
I know
the
so much
first episode of the
more,
last season aired,
I'm not just
and
technology.
so I actually rewrote like the ending of it because I didn't, when I wrote it, I didn't know how to end it. So I wrote an extra chapter.
In the clouds.
And I had, like, I think I put it there, it's like, here's how I think it's gonna end, like, just for fun, just to try to guess.
Into the
But
real
I think my
world.
favorite part is to talk about, what do I talk about? I don't know, I won't go into it. I mean,
Okay.
talk about the ending of Paradise Lost. Yeah, it's fun.
Fascinating.
Had fun writing.
The structural nightmare, I would imagine, but did you kind of follow? I don't think it is.
I said I wasn't gonna watch that show, and that's.
Oh, I love
and then
it.
unlocked it.
Absolutely love it.
Maybe this is, maybe this is turning out.
Nice and fresh.
Yeah, but like,
I mean, give that one may give
Oh,
an
yeah,
idea.
yeah.
And taking your first shot through.
Because I like
self-publishing
some of the
process, but
well-known quotes and
there's
try
a lot
to
of steps. And a lot of
riff off the
things that have
themes
to
that
go
I
around.
I'm here to work with you, and, you know,
I try to outline some of those steps, the things we need to do right now.
So I actually got to see
Ready to take the next step.
Brian Cranston when he came into town and did a reading at SMU
Okay.
for his memoir. And I don't know if he actually got the book, but I sent it to one of his, like, the people with him. I was like, hey, can you get this to him? And I wrote him a letter. It was like just fanboying all over the place. And it's pretty funny. I mean, I never heard anything like that, but
Okay.
I didn't expect it. All right. Now we get the fun stuff. So hopefully we have a pretty base understanding of the differences between well, maybe not the differences, about what self-publishing is and what traditional publishing is. And if you have further questions about it, we can talk about it at the end. So now we're going to kind of go to the back and forth. We're going to get to what I think are the 5 essential questions to ask yourself when you're trying to choose between the two. So we have the epic fight between self-publishing and traditional publishing. What's funny is when I was putting this together, I thought maybe Batman is more like self-publishing and Superman is more like traditional publishing, just because Superman has that like persona. So I needed to switch that, is what I'm saying. So very quickly, we're going to go into these in depth, but I just want to show you the benefits and the drawbacks to both self-publishing and traditional publishing. I'm hoping this isn't going to get too confusing. I'm afraid it might. So if I'm going too fast, tell me to slow down. But hopefully, this is the broad overview, and then we're going to kind of deep dive into the 5 questions. So, benefits of self-publishing. It's fast. It's much faster to self-publish a book than it is to get one traditionally published. We're going to talk about that. You have full control, which, like I said before, can be awesome and it can be terrible. It all depends on the kind of person you are and how much time, effort, and budget you have to put into your book. Higher royalties, it's always a good thing, but there is a drawback to that as well. We're going to talk about that in depth. When you self-publish, no rejection. I mean, there's possible rejection once you put the book out, but at least in terms of getting it published, nobody's there to say you can't. And then you maintain your rights all the time. The book is always yours to do with as you will. So let's look at the benefits of traditional publishing. Distribution, I think this is the chief. I would argue this is maybe the chief benefit of traditional publishing. They can get your book into places that you can't, at least you can't without a lot of extra work. Because they already have those connections and networks set up. Legitimacy. Some people, I mean, this one's interesting to me because of the questions we answered about who cares where a book is published. You know, if it's a good book, then I'm going to read it. But people will still see, like, you know, if you're traditionally published, especially other writers, that you have more legitimacy because you've gotten past those gatekeepers, you know. And we could argue about this, I think, for a while, I think, if I thought about it more. Because when you do get traditionally published, you have gone through an agent, and that agent has seen hundreds, if not thousands, if not many thousands of manuscripts. And they picked yours to represent, and they send it to a publisher who has seen, you know, like 10 to 100 times more content, and then they take that to publish and put their money and time behind it. So that's a benefit. Less upfront investment, like I said. You know, if you created your query letter, you wrote your book, you were able to land an agent, the agent sold your book, and you didn't have to spend anything on that, then it doesn't cost you anything but the time you spent doing it. And then professional help. All writers need professional help. Kind of true though. But what I mean by that is that traditional publishers have either in-house editors or freelance editors that they've used that they will use on your book, and you don't have to pay for that. Like the traditional publisher is taking care of that. So you don't have to go out and find your own, and then they get it, you know, they get it all nice and pretty, they get a nice cover designer, looks good. So you can still get professional help when you're self-publishing, but that's all I need. Now we're going to look at the drawbacks of each one. And yeah, we'll look at each one now. Drawbacks, distribution. I'm going to see if you see something familiar here. Legitimacy. Some people, I think it's a lot less than it used to be. You don't see self-published authors as quite as legitimate. There's a bigger upfront investment. There's little to no help. And I almost hesitated to put that one in there because you have to find the people to help you if you so choose. So hopefully you notice that the drawbacks of self-publishing were the benefits of traditional publishing. So can you guess what the drawbacks of traditional publishing would be? The opposite, self-publishing. So it's pretty slow. We're going to talk about the actual length, timing difference, so to speak. You have less control over certain aspects, but even that, for some people, is a deal breaker. Lower royalties. It's a fun one to talk about. We're going to talk about that as well. High rejection. I tried to find some numbers on this. I mean, it's kind of impossible to find strict numbers, but you will be rejected a lot, very likely, if you seek a traditional publishing deal. And it's almost a rite of passage. I have some of my stories about that as well. And then you can lose rights. I can't remember if I talked too much about that, but you don't have full control over your book because they could sell rights, they could claim rights, they could hold on to your book. I think I have some quotes about that, which just makes me sad for some of these authors. All right, have a question here. Let's see what the question is, because I forgot. It's the first question. This is the first essential question you want to ask yourself. And these really aren't in order, so it's not prioritized, but, yep, we got ASAP. How soon do you want to release your book? That's the question, in case I didn't say it. All right. That's a pretty good mix. I kind of thought it would lean, and for no reason whatsoever, I just thought it would lean closer to the left. Less than 6 months. And maybe that's because I get a lot of requests like that. Like, hey, can you edit this in 2 weeks? No. If that was my only job, maybe. But a lot of people that I work with, they want to get their books out. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think there are variables that some writers don't know about when it comes to self-publishing. Okay, and now we're almost even. It's funny. So, how soon do you want to release your book? I forgot I added this, and this makes me laugh. So, you can totally release your book in one day. You can release the book today. If you knew the steps, you can do it today. So, a friend of mine, I forwarded, I don't even know how he got it. Forwarded like an article to him about how you can self-publish easily, and for whatever reason he was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And he released, this is on Amazon right now. He released Finger Painting Basics. Which finger? It is 1 page. It's 1 page long. It's on Kindle. This is why you don't want to publish in a day. This book is a hoax. It has only 1 page after the front page. I was looking for ideas about finger painting, but the 1 page just tells you which finger. If I had taken the time to look at the number of pages, I would have realized that it was a joke, nothing more. Do not buy it. It's just a chance to get money while offering nothing in return, which is very true. I'm not going to tell you which finger he chose either, because they don't like it. You got to buy the book. So, I mean, this was a joke, and he should probably take it down because there are some unwitting poor souls that are actually buying it that want legitimate finger painting advice. But my point is that you should not try to release your book as soon as possible if you haven't put the work behind it. So definitely doing it in a day gets you reviews like this. He has 3 1-star reviews. I'm surprised 3 people reviewed it. That's impressive. So how long should you take if you're self-publishing? In reality, producing a quality self-published book requires at least 6 months to a year after you've written it. And again, you can self-publish something that's subpar, but I would argue that you should take at least 6 months to a year if you want to create something that's on par with traditional publishing, that looks like a legitimate book people want to pick up and read and buy off Amazon, all the fun stuff. And now I'm actually going to show you some numbers, and I pulled this from somebody else's website, but it holds pretty closely to what I experienced and to what I would recommend for my clients. Here's why. Yep. I know this is hard to see, so how long does it take to self-publish a book? And again, these are averages, and I'm going to send this information to you at some point after we get done. So they recommend beta readings for 4 weeks. It's kind of an inexpensive way to get developmental editors. If you have trusted friends that can give you feedback, they're called beta readers. Review feedback, updating the manuscript, that's the work you do. You edit your manuscript, either you do that, you're hired out. Review of edits, another 2 weeks. Proofreading, 2.5 weeks. Definitely hire that out. They have proofreading / copy editing. Formatting, 4 weeks. Proofreading of the formatted manuscript. I'm going to make that distinction again. Don't hire a proofreader unless they're proofreading the printed version or the digital version that's already formatted, because between you write it, you change it, you send it to an editor, they change it, you incorporate their edits. It's a lot of stuff already going on, and then you send it to a formatter, something's probably going to get messed up. So you want to hire a proofreader after it's been formatted. Upload the manuscript to self-publishing platform, 1 week. Proofreading of the physical print proof, that's important, like I just said, 4 weeks. And that's 4 weeks because it includes the ship time. So if you self-publish a print book, it will take 2 to 4 weeks for that book to get to you after you upload it. I'm trying to remember, I've sometimes gotten it in a week. And you can sometimes pay to have it shipped really quickly, but then it's like 20, 30 bucks for the book. Just for that first physical print proof. Approved physical proof takes a week. Printing and shipping of print copies, I wouldn't have included that. So 29.5 weeks is what this editor came up with, which is roughly 6.78 months. So 6 months, 6 to 7 months to go through all those steps. And I guess, I'm trying to remember with the Breaking Bad book, mine was maybe 4 months to do all that. And I kind of did it in tandem with writing the thing, which I don't necessarily recommend. But that was also when I didn't really know anything. I was kind of learning along the way when I wrote that too. So let's talk about, compared to traditionally publishing, typically requires 1 year, if not 2 or 3 years. So we're talking about a difference between 6 months to a year to at least a year, if not 2 or 3. I could share a little about the Father Effect book. So I'm not the main author, but I worked on behalf of my client, who's the main author. It's his story, and I just helped to tell it. But that allowed me to see, what goes on with the traditional publishing world. And so we pitched it to an agent. He liked it, and he pitched it to a publisher. And with that first publisher, we got to the pub board meeting, which is kind of the last pass. Like, if you don't get past that, then too bad. It gets rejected. And that's when, like, their team, a lot of people all get together and they pretty much vote on the pros and cons of, if we take on this book, do we think it's going to do well, or, do you have objections? And so we didn't get past the pub board in that first one, which was kind of demoralizing because it was so early. I was like, oh, we're going to get it sold, like, almost immediately, which would have been great. And then we waited for a year. It was roughly a year before another publisher was interested in it. And I don't know how much work the agent did in all that time. I'm sure he was pitching it a lot. But I was just surprised that it took about a year for it to be bought. And then it took about another year after that for it to come out. So it was roughly a 2-year process for us between all that. And it's just a waiting game. I think, yeah. Here's why it's a waiting game, and hopefully this is going to work. This is a video coming up. Should be able to hear it.
Okay, time for me to Google how to get published. Find a list of agents, do research on your agents, write query letter to your agents. Okay, query letter. Okay, how to write a good query letter. Show you've done your research. Book your agent. Explain what your book is about. Step 1, the intro. Dear Greg. No. Dear Mr. Greg. Maybe not. Dear Greg. Step 2, book your agent. Explain what the book is about. My book is about in a world. Oh, God. No, there's a girl and another girl. There's a boy. Oh, no, absolutely not. I think there's a couple of men at one point. Once upon a time. There's friendship and love. It is a good book. That was great. Oh, there's a lot going on. No. Death and destruction. It's a sad book. It's really rad, I promise. Once you get past the first 30 pages. Step 3, market yourself. Give comparison titles and target demographic. Okay, Greg, please like my book. My book is really rad. I think you'll dig it. I am super marketable. I'm the most marketable gal on the market. I am a 4 out of 10 On a good day? Think Lord of the Rings, but less good. It's like my book. This is as good as it's gonna get. And send. Just check, just to see if you replied yet. No.
That's it. So one of the reasons it's so slow is because you spend your time doing this kind of stuff, and you spend typically a lot of time doing it, which isn't it's not a bad thing, but you have to ask yourself what, you know, you want to spend your time doing this, or you want to spend your time like trying to self-publish your own book. Let's see. So why is it so slow? Here's one reason. This is from a Facebook group that I belong to, so this is just one of the members of the Facebook group. I've sent out 20 or so queries so far, and I see that the majority of lit agents give anywhere between 3 to 6 or more weeks to respond, if they respond. But I've received a couple of polite rejections, which came back to me within 24 hours. I also read that there are writers who have received positive responses within 48 hours. This is from me, from things I've heard. Some experts suggest only pitching 5 agents per week. Some suggest pitching at least 50 agents or receiving 50 rejections before rewriting or shelving your work. If you follow both of those pieces of advice, you're looking at 10 weeks of just pitching plus 3 to 6 weeks waiting per each agent. That could be 30 to 60 weeks of just waiting. It's a long time. So a little anecdotal evidence for this, Sins of the Five Fathers. I wanted to try to see if we could get it traditionally published. And I pitched 66 agents, and I heard back from 6, maybe. And the most helpful ones were like, we like the story, but it's not for us. I mean, something like that. And really, I think, and there's no way for me to know this, this was my uncle who passed away. Like, there's no author to promote the book. And he did have it set up to be a series. It's not going to be a series. So I can understand, like, from a publisher standpoint, like, why would they invest their money in something like that, regardless of, you know, the level of the writing.
So really, if you're putting in all this time to query and all of that, doesn't it kind of balance out with the time you're putting in to self-publish?
Conceivably.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it might be a close tie on how much time you're putting into both. I'm just here to present information, because the weird thing about when I was putting this together, it's like, you know, you may have your answer right now, which path you want to take, but then we talk about the question number 2, and your answer may change. And you have to kind of factor in all of these issues at the same time to figure out what's right for you. But that's a good point. Let's see. Yeah. This is another person in that Facebook group. In my experience, it can take an agent weeks to get to queries, and I wouldn't assume that no answer in a few days is a rejection. Many get 50 plus queries per day. It's a lot. And then this, I wanted to show my actual, this is from querytracker.net, which is a really useful website. I used it when I was pitching my uncle's book, and I wanted to show you my actual timeline, but apparently my subscription ended. And for like a year, it's like $25. It's super worth it. Like I did it for his book because I knew I would be pitching agents. And you can get agent contact information on this website. You can also read what their experience was. Sometimes you can they'll post like comments about the agent and say, you know, I received this response within this many days. And they will show you the response. And sometimes maybe you get the same response and it's some kind of canned response that's a rejection. Typically with a publisher, not a publisher, with an agent, you can kind of tell what their canned responses are. And typically it's not advisable to reply to them. If you can tell it's a firm no, don't ask what can I do to make it better, because they don't have time and you probably won't hear back anyways. So this timeline, this is kind of confusing just like this. But this, I can't remember if this is days or weeks, but this is supposed to show that, like, okay, I contacted this agent on this day, 2 days later I heard back, it was a no-go. So this one, you know, maybe this is 10 days, and this one, maybe this was like 2 months, and they had a positive reaction. And so this is all, you track this yourself, this is all like self-reporting, but it's super useful, I think, because, you know, now if I
resubscribe to the site, I could go back in and say, oh, this agent was, pretty quick to respond. So it's a very helpful website. But that's one of the reasons why it takes so long is because agents don't respond quickly. And it's not because they don't want to, it's just because there are so many people submitting. So they have so much to work through. And so that's like, and you don't know how long it's going to take. That's one of the things, like with self-publishing, you can kind of say like, I'm going to hit this deadline, in 2 weeks I'm going to have this done. But when you're seeking an agent, you have to leave it open to like, well, maybe I'm going to give myself 6 months to a year. And that's actually what I did with that book. I set some kind of deadline. I said, I think between 4 and 6 months. I think I said, I'll give us 4 months to try to get somebody, which to me is kind of short. But I didn't want to wait too much longer than that. Also from the Facebook group, it's a total crapshoot, to be honest, and if I had waited for responses, I'd still be querying my first novel. Sometimes it's true, unfortunately. All right, now we have another question. I think this is our second question now. How much control of the process do you want?
I think that's the biggest complaint I hear from the people who have told me the negatives of the traditional is everything gets taken from them and they just go nuts about it.
Hoping somebody would say no control. Completely out of my hands. Okay, interesting. So let's talk about what do we mean by control. So when you're self-publishing, you have control over your pricing, and you could change the price of your book every day if you wanted to, just to mess with it, which is great. I mean, you could change it every hour. You control your cover design, you control your release date, you control your rights all the time, and you control your marketing. So the cons of self-publishing when it comes to control, editing, you do control that, but you might get a bad editor. They do exist, unfortunately. Whereas if you're going with a traditional publisher, hopefully the traditional publisher has done their homework and they have vetted that editor. Same for hiring a formatter, same for design, distribution. You don't have as much control in some ways. And then also put marketing, because marketing can be a pro and a con, I think, especially for self-publishing. So when it comes to self-publishing, this is from Nick Kokonis, and he wrote a really interesting blog post, Why We Are Self-Publishing the Aviary Cookbook. He said they chose to self-publish because we get to control the voice, content, and quality of the final product completely. If it's successful, we'll also all share the rewards together. So complete control was important to him. And then Jane, a good friend Jane, talking about control with traditional publisher, you have to give up a lot of power and control. The publisher gets to decide the cover, the title, the design, the format, the price, etc. You have to go through rounds of revisions and will likely have to change things you don't want to change. It's a scary thing. Can be scary for some people. And then Joanna Penn is a really good resource for self-publishers. You give up creative control when you sign with a publisher. Many authors get titles, covers, and marketing angles that they're not happy with. A friend of mine, Polly Courtney, famously resigned from her publisher on publication day. I just noticed it said on publication day, that's crazy. Because she was marketed as chick lit when she writes gritty novels about social issues. She was angry and upset about losing that creative control. You may also get an editor you don't agree with, especially as many of the more experienced editors move up in the company or are working freelance for more money. Which kind of goes against what I was just saying earlier about hopefully they've done their work, but that also makes sense. So when you work with a traditional publisher, you're bringing on a pretty large entity, depending on who you're going with. And their goal is to make the best product they can. But then they're not going to ask for your input necessarily on a lot of things. And so if you're, the thing, and I think it's the next question that we're going to get into, you have to ask yourself if giving up that control is worth some of these other benefits that we're about to get to. And really, this whole thing is always about what's the trade-off that I'm willing to make, and what's important to me in my books. So how much control, this is the pros of giving up control to traditional publishers. It's kind of flip-flop again. Editing, formatting, design, distribution, marketing. And the cons, so it's almost flip-flop from the self-publishing pros and cons. Here's a different way to look at the question. Alternative way to phrase the question is, how much work do you want to do? More control equals more work. However, you're still going to have to do an immense amount of work even after you've written your book. It's a lot of work to write a book, first of all. I mean, that's the crazy amount of work, but you're not done after that if you actually want to do something with the book, like you were talking about. Whether you do self-publishing or traditional publishing, you still have a lot of work to do. And I hate to say that, but it's just true. And now, people used to tell me that when I didn't know anything. And I was like, oh, it can't be, you just send out a few pitches every now and then, a few queries, whatever. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's a lot of work still. So just remember, the more control you have, the more work you typically have to do, I think. And then to help kind of distill it, self-publishing, full control, means you bear the full burden of your book. Traditional publishing, less control, you share the burden of your book. To some people, that's nice. Maybe you do want to give up having to look for an editor, having to find a cover designer, all those kind of things. And then the other variables that we're going to get to. Now, question 3. How many people do you want to reach? Kind of surprised nobody's picked the first one. We must have some humble writers in here. Or just realistic writers. Yeah. All right. That's good. I think those are the acceptable answers too. So, let's be honest with each other. This is what we all really want to see. Oh, maybe not. I was saying in general. I know. But, politics aside. But here's the thing I pulled from a 2011 article, which I thought was fascinating. Maybe okay, we'll open this up just to see if you can guess. How many books, this was from 2011, number of books sold since they were selected by Oprah and then discussed on and promoted on her show. How many, roughly? So according to one professor, they estimated, so of the 70 books, she singled out 55 million total sold. And then 59 of the 70 made it to the USA Today bestseller list. So that is impressive reach. I mean, but like, at our core, we want people to read what we've written. Like, who would not want to sell 1 million books? Who wouldn't want to be on the bestseller list? Maybe that's not like your chief goal in life, which I would advise you, don't let that be your chief goal in life. Don't let me stop you if that really is. But like, really, we want to reach as many people as we can. And one of the things, you know, unless you know Oprah, maybe not even then, you need to recalibrate your expectations for who you're going to reach. And I'm kind of glad nobody chose like I want to reach everybody. Kind of one of the major sins, so to speak, when you're putting together a book proposal, is your target audience is not anyone who reads. That's not a good target audience. Because it's almost like, well, duh, you know, writing a book, you know, hopefully you're going to reach anyone who reads. You really want to get targeted with your target audience. You want to find the people who are going to really connect with your book and become your fans, essentially. So let's talk about, this is really a question of distribution. So Lee Shine said, traditionally published books still overwhelmingly dominate the physical market as well as nearly half of the digital market. Something to take into consideration. So the thing with, we're going to talk about books getting into bookstores too, because it's still a part of the equation, an interesting part, I think. So here's Tim Grahl. He does a really excellent website. And what's funny is, so as I was putting this course together, he published this article, which was called Traditional versus Self-Publishing, the Last Decision Guide You'll Need.
Yeah.
So you could have just gone to his site and, you know, totally not come here. But I was also glad to see that, like, my questions essentially are what he pulled out too. So he said, with regard to traditional publishing, you'll spend a long time desperately pitching agents that are getting too many pitches, which we already talked about. Once you finally get one, they probably won't be able to sell your first, second, or third manuscript. I don't know about that, but Tim also has a lot more experience in the traditional world than I do, so that could be true. Once they finally do sell your manuscript, you'll get a $5,000 advance, maybe, 0 marketing support, and almost 0 distribution in physical bookstores. I find that interesting. And we'll talk a little bit about it here in a second. If you really bust your butt and get your book to sell, they might pick up your next manuscript and you might get light distribution in stores. But it'll quickly get pulled if fans aren't showing up in the stores and buying your book. And the odds of hitting the New York Times bestseller list are really, really low. So that's like a pretty, to me, it's almost a pessimistic point of view. But I think there's a little bit of reality in that as well. And I think it helps temper your expectations for what could happen when you're traditionally published. So let's talk about the bookstore. One key retail metric after another, Barnes & Noble continued to fare poorly. I'm trying to see when this was. This was from September of last year. Online sales, shopper traffic, comparable sales of books, and comparable sales of non-books. This bleak picture comes at a time Barnes & Noble is continuing with arch rivals Amazon.com, growing physical footprint, and the increasingly strong hold its Prime loyalty program has on customers. So when you're talking about distribution and how many people you want to be able to find your book, part of the appeal to traditional publishing is that they get your book in bookstores. As a self-publisher, it's very hard to do that. It's very hard. And I've researched it and I was like, that's too much work. Like, I don't have enough time to do that kind of work. But when you're talking about traditional publishing, where are the bookstores going? You know, if you look at Barnes & Noble as kind of the big player, which they still are, they're dwindling. Like, it's you know, how long are they going to stay around? But there's still something to bookstores. I want bookstores to stay around. So while pressure from Amazon forced Borders out of business in 2011, indie bookstores staged an unexpected comeback. Between 2009 and 2015, the ABA, American, I don't know what ABA stands for, Booksellers Association, American Booksellers Association, thank you, pretty sure, yeah, reported a 35% growth in the number of independent booksellers from 1,651 stores to 2,227. That's a lot. And just because I like to promote them, some of my favorite independent bookstores, Deep Vellum, anybody been there? No, it's in Deep Ellum. Totally cool spot. I mean, it's small, but like they face most of the books out. Really kind of eclectic collection, but a really cool space. It's actually where the Nonfiction Authors Association meets every other month now, on the 4th Thursday of the month. And so I really like the space. And then, and I don't remember when they opened, but it's been a few years. And then Interrobang Books is off Royal and Preston Oaks. It's another independent bookstore that just opened last year. And that's a really nice space as well. So the point I'm trying to make is that bookstores aren't going away. Just the Barnes & Noble may be going away, and Amazon may be replacing it with physical bookstores. So Amazon, their next physical bookstore is going to be in Austin this year, what I recently read. I wouldn't be surprised if they do one in Dallas eventually.
Does an independent bookstore look at self-published?
Not often. There's still, and I've had kind of like brief conversations about that. And so Deep Vellum did carry, they carried a couple of my books, but that's because I kind of had this relationship with them through this other thing I was doing. But like in Terabang, from a brief discussion, typically they're not interested. And so that's where it gets interesting, because if you do, there are some independent bookstores that do that, and they do it on consignment. I actually went to Albuquerque to do a Breaking Bad tour because I'm a nerd like that. And I took some of my books and I said, hey, can I sell this? I went to an independent bookstore there and said, hey, can you sell some of these for me? And they said, sure, but it's on consignment. And so essentially to get your book in a bookstore, you have to go to each bookstore. There's no easy way to do it. And essentially build up those relationships. And then if your book doesn't sell, then they're going to take it off. And
Yeah, it's your financial risk, right?
Yeah.
You have to buy and provide all the books,
Yeah.
or you have to guarantee buybacks of anything that doesn't sell.
correct. So it's difficult and time consuming. And so that's one of the drawbacks to being self-published. Let's see. As we were talking, the distribution of self-published books, either print or digital, happens mainly online. While it is possible to get into local and regional libraries, we haven't talked about libraries, and independent bookshops, self-published books are unlikely to be seen in bookstores countrywide. That still holds true. That may change in the future, but right now it's pretty true. Then I thought this was interesting too, and this might be news to some people. Late in January of this year, Walmart and Kobo announced a retail partnership whereby Walmart will offer Kobo's nearly 6 million titles, both ebooks and audiobooks, to Walmart.com customers. What's more, while Kobo and Walmart will leverage sales through a co-branded app for iOS and Android, Walmart will sell digital book cards in stores for Kobo. It's almost difficult to understand. So Kobo is like a reading platform, like the Kindle, except, I'm going to go to this one first. Kobo accounted for fewer than 1% of ebook purchases last fall, while purchases from Amazon total about 75%. So what's the point I'm trying to make? I'm going back here. Kobo is trying to make a play for like digital and print sales by teaming up with Walmart, which means that there are a lot of self-published works in Kobo. This means that self-published ebooks could be for sale at Walmart, online and in their stores. It's possible. But is that, does that make up for the deficit that could happen if Barnes & Noble goes out of business? I don't think so. But it's this gets to the confusing part about distribution. And then Tim, again, unless your book gets picked up by a major chain such as Walmart and Target, like we just said, even with wide distribution in the stores like Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, over 90% of your sales will still come from Amazon. It's crazy. The odds of bookstores stocking your book if you're a traditionally published are low but not zero. The odds if you're self-published are basically zero. It's just something to keep in mind. When The Father Effect came out, I looked around at a few Barnes & Noble to see where it was available. It wasn't available, the release date at the Barnes & Noble closest to where I live. But I eventually found it like in the new Barnes & Noble at Legacy West, which that's a cool spot if you haven't been there. It's like a bookstore / cafe dining area. But even then, there weren't that many copies, and I'm willing to bet if I look now, there probably aren't any copies. I mean, as far as I know, it's selling okay, but it's not like selling so wildly well that they're going to keep replenishing it. If you kind of don't do well out of the gate, maybe within the first month, then it just kind of gets on the back list, so to speak. So you could go to Barnes & Noble and say, hey, I want to copy this book, and they would order it for you. But very likely it's probably not on the shelf, if I had to guess. Did you have a question, Trevor? No, I just saw your hand. So speaking of Amazon's dominance, Amazon sells about 68% of all books sold online and about 40% of all books sold, period. I don't actually know where those numbers come from, which I should research. But I'm comfortable enough saying that Amazon sells a ton of books, percentage-wise. And even in my own sales, across all the books that I have access to sales data for, Amazon accounts for 90%. I don't know, it's huge. A couple couple that with a book website tied to social media reach, the whole popular restaurant or chef, Google ads, and Facebook advertising, any cookbook, for example, can reach a substantial worldwide audience. Simply put, reaching an audience directly for a book without a publisher has never been easier. But making a great book remains difficult and takes a lot of time and money. So this article was really interesting because they talk about making a really nice cookbook. Cookbooks typically have pictures, the recipes, they're full color. Full color costs a lot more to print. So he said how much they spent, and I was going to get into all that, but that's really into the weeds. Suffice it to say, they spent a lot more than $2,000 on that book to self-publish it. But then they recouped their costs because they had, they had fans of their restaurant already. And then they used Google ads. They used these other things to really market it and find the exact people who would want to buy that cookbook. And this is from Jane. When writers chase self-publishing as an alternative to traditional publishing, they often have a nasty surprise in store. No one is listening. They don't have an audience. It talks to platform again. It talks to distribution. When you're self-publishing, distribution is kind of on you. When you upload to Amazon, you can share it once on Facebook and say, hey, my book's available, but who's going to see that? Maybe 10% of your friends. And it's really up to you. With a traditional publisher, you're going to get a lot more help to that. I say a lot more, maybe not a whole lot more in some instances. And then Jane again, for some types of nonfiction, it's essential to have a platform in place before you write the book. The fact that many nonfiction authors don't typically write the full manuscript until after acceptance of their proposal is indicative of how much platform means to their publication. We talked about that earlier. Platform's important. I think platform's important for every writer, especially if you want to sell a book. But there is a multiplying factor when you have a platform plus a traditional publisher, because that traditional publisher can get you into more places. So if I pulled up I should have thought about that. If I pulled up the webpage that John on the Father Effect created, and it says, it lists, actually, let me just do that. It's actually my page, so I'm gonna, so I did order now. These are all the places that the traditional publisher put the book out, at least digitally. And some of these places, you can do all this, just about all this self-publishing, but then you have to do all that work. And then you have to keep on top of all that, and it can kind of become a mess. But this is just the power of, where a traditional publisher can get you. So, I think, let's see. Here we go. Simply put, unless you build a sizable platform, you likely won't reach as many people self-publishing as you would through traditional publishing. Likely. However, the follow-up question is, who is my book really for? Does it really target a mass general audience? Do you need to reach so many people? It's a legitimate question. It'll be nice, maybe your book can break wide. But maybe you can reach the people you need to reach. That makes sense. Okay, we'll take another break now. So we've got 2 more questions to work through, and then we'll do a Q&A. I think this is going to work. I'm always anxious. Okay. I'm always anxious to see if I can get through all the information in 2 hours. It goes by fast for me.
Yeah.
I know.
Aren't there groups of, isn't there an audience for people who really want to only read the indie writers?
Oh yeah.
So they're out there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I know a few.
Yeah, they just focus on indie writers because they feel like.
Well, they probably latched onto like one indie writer, and then that indie writer knows others that are probably in the same genre.
Yeah.
I'm guessing. But that's a good point that it would be interesting to ask them why they gravitate toward
And
that.
then I'm sorry, I should say my question.
Well, you gotta ask her that.
I don't know. I mean, can you, if I say self-published a book, can I then pitch it to a traditional publisher?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Because a lot of them don't want to talk to you until they know you've already got legs.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
what I've heard is that, so for the most part, you can't. Not, I shouldn't say you can't, of course you can.
They don't like that
For
though.
the most part, you shouldn't, but there's an asterisk that I've heard that, like, if you sell 10,000 out of the gate,
Mhm.
they're gonna be interested. So that kind of
Well,
gives you a number. for
I mean,
what
was
sales.
it 50 Shades, an indie book,
Yeah,
and
we're
then the
gonna talk
traditional
about that
picked it up?
actually.
I actually know a group of indie writers up in Dallas fairly well, up in near Allen.
And they do okay. I mean, you're not gonna, you're
No,
not
I
gonna,
mean like the
you're not
lady that runs
do a
it.
Harry Potter
No,
level
no,
thing.
but I mean they're not trying to. Like, you know, the
They
lady
just
that
do
runs
it
it's a
for the
professor.
art.
Yeah, and I mean they do it because it's their passion. And so I mean, you know, she runs a self-publishing company too. Kind of like one of those discussed earlier. But they have like conventions throughout the year, like up in the Allen area.
See, I've been to some conventions and I pitched to a couple of agents and they were very friendly. They're like, oh, that sounds like something we would be interested in, but, you know, I don't know. It just seems so impossible sometimes to go the traditional route. I mean, what are the odds, you know? I don't know.
Do you have readers already, or are you?
Mm-mm. But I've been in a lot of groups, and they already have, you know, a following and an agent and stuff like that, and they talk. So, I don't know. It's like he said, it's a crapshoot.
I think one of the nice things, if you self-publish and you have some reasonable level of success, so if you decide to go the traditional publishing route later, it
It
actually
helps.
gives you a lot of credibility with the agents. Here's the
Or to
books
your
I want.
platform.
Or your platform.
Create your
Establish your
platform.
platform, right.
I have a friend who writes romance, and she doesn't have an agent. She has publishers that she works with, but she and I were at the workshop I was talking about together, and we were together, and an agent and the publisher were there for the whole thing, and they didn't want to talk to her until she hit the Newsweek, I think Newsweek #1 bestseller, and then all of a sudden everybody at the thing, they were all the attendees, and I was bad too. We were following her around like groupies, and then the agents, then they wanted to talk to her. So she kind of tells me she does both, and they call that being a hybrid. She does both. She does independent and traditional, but she's in romance. And she cranks out books. I mean, she's like, she probably has at least 3 or 4 books that need to come out, if not more. And I, you know, I'm not going to put out 3 or 4 books a year. I don't have that kind of talent. But she can.
Because that's all super involved. So,
Obviously, right?
That's good.
I'm trying to be super invested.
It was
I think it really comes down to how productive you are, is what kind of writer you are. Like, how much do you improvise? How much do you really feel the planner? You know, like, cause like I plan some and then just like kind of fill in some of the gaps along the way too. I mean, I know there's some writers that are like every scene is planned out.
Oh, I'm a planner.
Yeah,
I'm a
yeah.
planner.
So I mean, like, there's advantages and disadvantages too. Like, I like the plan, but I mean, it's
Oh no, I have theme cards, I have character development.
That's actually where I got through with it. Like, if I could just do that.
That's the way my whole life works.
Yeah,
My
and I
whole
mean-
life is on digital books, and don't mess with my stuff. So, I mean, that's just the way my mind works. But some people, yeah, they can just sit down
It's always something new.
and enhance it, and then boom, it's done. I'm not like that.
I read a book from a guy I know at that one of those conferences. He said he revised the book. Terrible. It was absolutely terrible. It was contrived and cliche and extremely predictable. And I just didn't support it. You know, like after a while, I gave up on it. Like it was almost like
That's his book.
he wrote like each chapter like once a month. I forgot what happened the last time, and then just wrote it like it was like its own separate
Maybe
scene.
each chapter was its own short story.
Yeah, but it's all like the same story, but it's almost like he like forgot the details of what just happened. And I was like, but wait, wasn't this person just there? Who's that? You know, like that person wasn't there last time. You know,
I
I was
have a notebook with all my stuff, and I'm trying to be paperless and not have the notebook, but I'm like that. I have a list.
like, oh, I love,
I know, I have a list where, gotta take,
you know, like.
I'm just trying to be paperless, but, yeah.
Like an actual grade.
We all back in here? I think we are. Huh? I believe so. I enjoy it. She can't wait back. We need like another video. Okay, next question. Question number 4. How much money do you want to make per book? Fun question. Per book, that'd be awesome. Like a gilded cover, diamond encrusted. I mean, I'm talking that's a really nice cup of coffee. Like, it's a $5.
Latte, yeah,
It's like a $5 cup.
extra squirt.
I guess with my ice cream, should I cover up the logo?
I'm going for it. I'm gonna make as much as possible. Even if it's $1, if that's possible.
That's a good point.
So much better it is. Somebody from outside the family reads it once.
Okay, that's good information to know. I like that most of us have moderate expectations. But it's okay to have high expectations too. So the first thing I want to cover is, does anybody know how royalties work? If you do, I want you to explain it. Just because I'm curious to hear that. Trevor, yeah.
So when you have the royalties for something, you own the rights to it. Every time somebody else uses that material, you get part of the cut that they get.
That could almost be licensing, more so.
Okay. Never mind.
No, that's okay. It's okay. I mean, it's close. You could call it a royalty. Anybody else? I guess royalties too. Huh?
No way, I don't know it.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's fine. I didn't know any of this stuff before I started living in this world. So when you traditionally publish, and a publisher picks up your book, they buy your book, they will give you an advance. Let's say that advance is $5,000. I should probably say $10,000 because then I can do the math more easily, maybe. Let's say $10,000. Let's say the publisher is being generous. You could almost take $5,000 as kind of a baseline advance. It could be less, but I've heard $5,000 is kind of typical. But then those advances can go up to like $1 million. You know, if you're a totally famous person who's about to write a book, you're going to get a big paycheck, big advance. It's called an advance because it's an advance against royalties. So let's say a publisher bought your book for $10,000. They would pay you $10,000. Like with the Father Effect book, we got paid in 3 installments. So we got paid when the contract was signed, we got paid when we turned the book in, and then we got paid when the book was published. So for however much we got paid, it was split up into 3 payments over the course of about a year. So you don't get all that money up front, typically. Some publishers may work differently, you know, I don't know. But before you see any more money, ever, before you start getting royalties, the publisher has to recoup their investment in you. So the publisher would have to make $10,000 off your book before you start seeing
Plus the cost of editing,
any
plus
of
the
those.
cost of cover, plus everything else.
They just have to make up that $10,000 that they spend on you. And then you start seeing royalties. And royalties are a percentage of your sales. And that's an important thing to understand before we start into all this conversation. So, how much do you want to make? Let's see. The median author advance is currently around $10,000. Royalties are usually 7 to 25% of net book price, averaging 10%. And she's talking about traditional publishing. So 10% is kind of a good number to
Net versus gross?
Yeah, I believe. I'm reading over my notes here.
It's an important distinction.
It is. And then don't forget your agent's 15% cut of your advance and your royalties. So of that $10,000, your agent would automatically get 15% of it. And then when your book starts making royalties, they also get 15% of that. That's how an agent gets paid. They don't get paid upfront by you. They get paid by the publisher. So they have skin in the game to sell your proposal to a publisher. And then that's how they make their living. And then compared to self-publishing royalties, maybe. So this is probably going to be confusing, but I will try to make it less so as we go along. So CreateSpace was bought by Amazon a long time ago. It's how you would self-publish a print book, and their royalties are roughly 20 to 25%. So when you self-publish, there's no such thing as advance. Nobody's paying you any money up front. But when you sell a book, like from the very first book you sell, you're going to make roughly 20 to 25% of the retail price. And so the good thing about self-publishing, you get to set your own retail price. I wouldn't advise going crazy with it. I think I try to keep my print books around $10. Amazon likes that price point. So I may sell it for $11.99, and then when I sell a book, I will make 20 to 25% of $11.99. And I think that might be, I have to check the math because all this math stuff drives me crazy. I think that 20 to 25%, because you were talking about net versus gross.
Yep.
So it costs Amazon, and they show you all this information on the back end when you do this. It costs them, I guess, maybe $3.41 to create the book. So then I'm probably making 20 to 25% off of whatever $12.99.
That's the key, right? Is it 12? Is it 20% of $11.99, or is it 20% of what's the profit margin?
Yeah.
Essentially, are you taking 20% of the margin of the book, or 20% of the net price?
This is where it gets thick.
When it says 7 to 25% of net book price, when you say net, to me that means profit.
Yeah.
Right? Because gross would be the actual retail price.
Right.
So
Yeah,
they've already subtracted their costs out.
Yes.
And then they give you the royalty.
Yes. That is important to remember. They subtract their costs out, whether you're traditionally published or self-published.
It does, but people think I sold the book for $10, I'm supposed to get 20%, I should get $2. But in reality, if the book costs $3 to publish, you sold it for $7, you're only getting $1.40.
Yeah.
Per book, 20%.
I think that's right. Okay, you know what? I'm going to show you. Hopefully, I'm not going to show you anything that gives my information away. I'm going to show you my woeful sales lately, just so you can see, because there's a royalty calculator, and I think that might be interesting if you're unfamiliar with this. Let's go. Oh, look, I've sold 3 books this month. That's great. I think I've done this so often. There we go. So this is for the Gospel According to Breaking Bad. I can go in here and change the list price as much as I want. Currently it's set at $11.99, and if I sell it on Amazon.com, I'm going to get $3.78. So maybe that is what is that percentage?
It's actually pretty high. It's about 33%.
Yeah,
30% actually.
Is that after Amazon gets?
Yeah, like I'm going to get paid $3.78 if I sell this print book. And yeah, that is fairly high.
31.5%.
Yeah. And then you can also see that it says minimum list price for this title is $8.53, and that's because that's how much it costs them to produce it, to distribute it.
So they won't let you
Lower it
any
any
lower
lower
than
than
that,
Right.
So do you offer these as ebooks as well as paper?
I do.
Okay, and so the difference, from what I understood when I looked into self-publishing, is if you offer an ebook, through Amazon, they can also put you on the Kindle Unlimited and sell your ebook for free.
If you know that analog.
With
And they do
that,
that periodically.
true. I mean, this is really getting into the weeds of pricing. No, it's okay because it is confusing, and this is one of the things that I think prevents people from self-publishing because you don't necessarily know what you're getting into because there are so many variables. Let me run through this real fast because I'm going to throw all of these up there because I want you to see. So Ingram Spark is another distributor like CreateSpace. I have not used it, though I've heard it's helpful if you're doing print to go through both CreateSpace and Ingram Spark. I actually had issues with it because I didn't know that at the outset. But you can see Ingram Spark ebooks, you get 40 to 45%, print 16%, KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. If you price your ebook between 99 cents and $1.99, you get 35% royalties. If you price it between $2.99 and $9.99, you get 70%. It's really good. And then if you price it at $9.99 or higher, that's 35%. So they do that on purpose because they like those price points between $3 and $9. So they're incentivizing you to price it at those price points. And then Smashwords is a digital distributor that helps you distribute to a wide number of platforms, but just through their platform. So I actually have my editing book on Smashwords, which means it's then on iBooks, it's on Kobo, it's on like some companies I've never heard of that distribute overseas. It's on Overdrive, I think, which gets it into library ebook systems, which is pretty cool. And they give you really good percentages, but then those percentages are based on where all these versions are going. So, the point I'm trying to make, because it's confusing, if you notice, you average 10% here. The lowest number over here is 16%, with the highest being 85%. So, the very general point.
My only rejoinder to that is when you're going through traditional publishing, usually it's offset printed, and the offset print cost is a lot lower. So since you're calculating it on profit, even though it might be 10% of the profit actually might be a lot higher because the cost of the printed book is a lot lower.
True, and
There's a lot of variability here.
I know, which
Don't want
makes
to
it so confusing. That's a good point that I didn't think about. But there is another reason too why the number could be better for traditional publishing.
There's arguments both ways.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So essentially, you will stand to make less per book traditionally publishing than you could with self-publishing. Your royalties stand to be much higher with self-publishing. Stand to be, but there's a couple of problems with it too. So 70 to 80% of books never earn out their advance. That means you get nothing. You don't have to pay your advance back, which is nice. So if some publisher gives you $25,000 and you sell 3 books, well, you're $25,000 richer. You don't have to give it back. It's yours. That was their investment in you. That was their risk, essentially. But if you never sell enough for the publisher to recoup that $25,000, you never see any more money from that book.
Will
And
they
that
talk to
publisher,
you again?
huh?
Will they talk to you again after you didn't?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're considered a washout?
Conceivably. Yeah.
One and done?
Yep.
All right.
One hit wonder.
Yeah, here's the big catch, I think. Traditional publishing offers smaller royalties but increased distribution, like we talked about. So you may earn less per book, but you may be able to sell a whole lot more books, which makes up for that difference. And then the reverse is true for self-publishing. You get higher royalties but less distribution.
All marketing is, I mean, I know traditional publishing doesn't do a whole lot of marketing, but it's still, your book is out there, the cover is out there. When somebody's walking through the bookstore, they see it, as opposed to self-publishing. If you don't put it out there, it's not out there at all.
But just because it's traditionally published doesn't mean it's going to be carried in the bookstore. It's
Yep.
really challenging to get it into a bookstore, even in that case.
And
Yeah.
it may not be out on the tables that are in the middle of the aisles.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
It'll be on
Yeah. And typically, traditional publishers will typically invest mostly in who they know is going to sell. That's why you see Stephen King,
Makes sense.
you know, he's on the end cap. And publishers pay typically to have books placed on the end caps. And then, you know, unless your book is like one of those one-hit wonders that comes out and just starts selling like crazy, then they'll start putting money toward it. But typically, you will get like a modest marketing push when it releases, and then if it doesn't take off after that, they're on to the next thing. So it's a cruel world. I feel like I need to apologize for like presenting all this information, and then it's just like it keeps weighing like this. I mean, I know. Like even when I was writing this, I was like, okay, you know.
No, but you're not trying to tell everybody what the right thing is for them.
Yeah.
You're trying to present information so they can make their own decision. I think that's appropriate.
Yeah. And then this is just kind of extra information, just so you know. Payment frequency is very different between traditional publishing and self-publishing. Traditional publishing, maybe every 6 months, maybe once a year. And this is talking about royalties. And then self-publishing, typically monthly, if you've sold anything. And then reporting is also very different. I've heard that with traditional publishing, you may not be told anything, or you may have to like contact your agent or the publisher to get information. With self-publishing, you get like all the information you can handle, pretty much, which is helpful, can be. And then, so we all know the traditional publishing success stories. We know, we read people like Stephen King, J.K. Rowling. You may not know some of the self-publishing success. So I put in a few of these mostly because it was fun, and I hadn't read some of these self-publisher stories. So I'm going to read a few of them, if you'll let me, just to show that it is possible. But I think there are a lot of like, I don't know, I will hold off on that thought. And this almost goes in kind of chronology of when Amazon first released, first allowed us to self-publish pretty easily. So this is Amanda Hocking, and I'm going to read a little bit from an article about her because her story is kind of funny. We find Hocking sitting in her tiny, sparsely furnished apartment in Austin, Minnesota. Yeah, don't you know? She's penniless and frustrated, having spent years fruitlessly trying to interest traditional publishers in her work. To make matters worse, she's just heard that an exhibition about Jim Henson, the creator of the Muppets, is coming to Chicago later that year, and she can't afford to make the trip. As a huge Muppets fan, she is more than willing to drive 8 hours, but has no money for petrol. You can guess where this article is written. Let alone a hotel for the night. What is she to do? Then it comes to her. She can take one of the many novels she has written over the previous 9 years, all of which have been rejected by umpteen book agents and publishing houses, and slap them up on Amazon and other digital ebook sites. Surely she can sell a few copies to her family and friends. All she needs for the journey to Chicago is $300, and with 6 months to go before the Muppets exhibition opens, she's bound to make it.
This is a book itself.
Yeah.
I'm writing this one down.
I'm going to sell books on Amazon, she announces to her housemate Eric, to which Eric replies, yeah, okay, I'll believe that when it happens. Let's jump to October of 2010. So this was 7 years ago. In those 6 months, Hocking has raised not only the $300 she needed, but an additional $20,000, selling 150,000 copies of her books. Over the past 20 months, Hocking has sold, this was written in 2012, over the past 20 months, Hocking has sold 1.5 million books and made $2.5 million, all by her lonesome self. Not a single book agent or publishing house or Salesforce or marketing manager or bookshop anywhere in sight. So let the historians take note. Amanda Hocking does get to Chicago to see the Muppets, and along the way she helps to foment a revolution in global publishing. So she was kind of one of the very first early success stories of publishing on Kindle. Part of me, I included a few of these because I just find their stories interesting, and it kind of gives you hope that maybe that could happen. But then part of me kind of hesitated to do that because it's so rare. But it's just as rare to become like somebody like Stephen King. I keep using him just because it's kind of easy. But anybody like that who can make a lot of money at this writing thing. And I know that not all of our goals is to make art, is to make money. But that's an important part of it, especially if you want to do this for a living. So another one you may or may not know, E.L. James, who we have to thank for article titles like 50 Shades of Grey, the series that tied publishing up in knots. And I'll briefly share some of her story. This is from a 2015 article, The Unstoppable Success of the 50 Shades Trilogy, which probably everybody knows about by now, was originally self-published as fan fiction of the vampire series Twilight. I don't know if anybody knew that. Has left the publishing industry and the literary world reeling. E.L. James may now be among the wealthiest authors in the world, having made 75 million pounds, whatever that converts to in dollars, from the 125 million copies of her book sold worldwide. That was in 2015. But the critical response towards both the series and the film has been almost universally negative. Critics have called her writing boring and clunky. Salman Rushdie said he had, quote, never read anything so badly written that got published. It made Twilight look like War and Peace. End quote. Writing in the New York Times, columnist Maureen Dowd called James, quote, Bronte devoid of talent, quote. So I just take that to mean, you know, even if the writing is subpar, it can still make.
I think she's got the last laugh here, though.
Oh, yeah.
She's taken all those negative comments to the bank.
Yeah,
and
she looks very happy.
The writing's subpar, but the subject matter sells.
Yeah.
Exactly, that's what I was.
And then Hugh Howey was actually kind of my first introduction to a self-published author that became really big. And I followed his blog for a while. And I listened to Wool on a drive from Florida to Texas. And it was pretty good. And I think it's going to become a movie. Yeah. Maybe a series. Read a little bit about his story. The opening chapters of Wool first appeared as a 99-cent ebook novella via Kindle Direct Publishing in July 2011. Howie had written the post-apocalyptic story about a community of people living underground in giant silos without intending to immediately follow it up with more installments. Quote, I self-published it and went right back to my next work, he says. But by October, Howie noticed Wool was eclipsing all of his previous works and was positioned to sell 1,000 copies by the end of the month. Quote, I figured this was going to be the pinnacle of my career. It's crazy. He said, by that summer, Howie was selling 20,000 to 30,000 digital copies of Wool a month and making a monthly salary of $150,000 from ebook sales alone. He quit his day job. Also of note regarding Howie, quote, after walking away from several six-figure advance offers and 2 7-figure advances, Howie became the first self-published author ever to be offered a print-only contract and a significant 6-figure advance by a major publisher. So I found that pretty interesting, is that he retained his ebook rights and said, you know, traditional publisher, if you want to put this out, I'm keeping my ebook rights, which has served him well. Mark Dawson is another success story. Dawson has become an entrepreneur with the self-publishing platform. He had no choice. The tactics he employed to promote his series aren't game-changing or even particularly clever, but the scale in which he implemented them is what made the difference. Okay, I wanted to see if I wanted to keep reading all this. To date, he has sold over 300,000 copies of a series about an assassin called John Milton. Dawson says he pocketed 6 figures last year, and he's on course to make much more this year. He's got plans for bigger, better things for the series outside of print form. Dawson's recent success isn't representative of his time in publishing, however. He actually had a book published by Penn Books called The Art of Falling Apart in 2000, which completely bombed. Not because it was bad. Ironically, it's now available on Kindle and has 32 5-star reviews out of 39, but because few people read it or are aware of it. And that was a traditionally published book, as far as I understand. Mark puts the book's failure down to the publisher's inability to promote his work and generate any sort of interest. That's fascinating. He got so desperate to boost sales that he'd visit a bookstore and move his book to his shelf where it was more visible. As you read on, you'll see that this is indicative of Dawson's personality and why self-publishing is a perfect platform for someone like him. That's pretty funny. He also does this like Facebook for Authors group course stuff. I forget how much it is. You do have to pay for it. But like, and I think he's the guy. I listen to way too many writing podcasts, and I believe he's the guy who, when he was first testing out Facebook advertisements, he took out like he maxed out credit cards with Facebook advertisements. And his, you know, he's married, and his wife was like, "What the heck are you doing? What are you?" And we're not talking about like $5,000. I mean, I think like $10,000, $20,000. Crazy. But he figured out how to make that work, how to sell books. And I mean, obviously, if you're making that kind of money, you figured something out. So in the back of my mind, there are some days I'm like, I kind of want to try that, but I'm not there yet. And then you may or may not know that The Martian was based on a self-published book. The Martian began as a series of self-published chapters on Andy Weir's personal blog. Then Weir decided to put the book on Amazon, selling it for the website's lowest possible price of 99 cents. That's when things snowballed. It topped Amazon's best-selling list of science fiction. Then it debuted at the number 12 spot on the New York Times bestseller list for hardcover fiction books. Then eventually it became a pretty good movie, I thought, which was really close to the book too. So that's a good one. And then most recently, Rupi Kaur, I have no idea how to say her name. This is poetry. She's self-published. Like, who would think that self-published poetry would become like New York Times bestseller, like sell like crazy? So I'll read her story to you. And this is the last one for these stories. So Miss Kaur, who's 25 and Punjabi Canadian, is used to the ups and downs. In the 3 years since her blockbuster, Milk and Honey was first published and later picked up by Andrews McMeel Publishing, she has dealt with all the issues other women face on Instagram and off, comparisons, aggression, bullying. But she has also built a community and an audience there in particular with 1.6 million followers on Instagram. Daunted by the tough stuff, she remained because, quote, it came back to the accessibility, she said. Quote, Instagram makes my work so accessible and I was able to build a readership. On Instagram, on like the social media platform for pictures, which is fascinating. Ms. Kaur said recently, Cafe and Soho, but then I always feel like within the literary world, there's of course downsides because you have that label attached to your work and then for some reason that means you aren't a credible literary source. Milk and Honey has sold 2.5 million copies worldwide and has been translated into 25 languages. Over the last 2 years, it has spent 77 weeks on the New York Times trade paperback bestseller list. Her second book, The Sun and Her Flowers, was released this week, which was October 5th, 2017, and is number 2 on Amazon's bestseller list. And I see both of these books on Barnes & Noble's new release, like, featured section all the time. So, those are a bunch of stories to say that this stuff happens. It's possible, but it's rare. And I just find it fascinating for self-published poetry, of all things, to be doing so well. So good for her. But here's the downside to it. This was taken from 2016. Self-published ISBNs hit 786,935 in 2016. I don't actually know if that's just US or if that's worldwide. I don't think it matters because that's an insane number for 1 year. And this also doesn't take into account that there are a lot of books on Kindle that don't have ISBNs. Because if you publish digitally on Kindle, you don't have to have an ISBN. So that number could be 1 million. So like you're putting your book, yeah, that's in 1 year. Yeah, it's just scary. So that's just to kind of point to how rare that kind of success is for a self-publisher, and even really for any author, I would argue. And then our good friend Jane, I love her advice. Self-publishing or ebook publishing options will not get your physical book into stores or lead to many sales unless you're willing to put significant and persistent effort into marketing and promotion. Most self-published authors find that selling their book is just as hard, if not harder, than finding a publisher or agent. Those who succeed and profit often devote years of their life, if not their entire lives, to marketing and promoting their work and have a flair for entrepreneurship. In short, it's a ton of work like starting a small business if you do it right. Which I said that earlier, and I gave up. So, it takes a lot of work. And then, really, the last thing I want to leave you with for this question, anyone in it for the coin should find some other field. I don't think that's a bad motivation to have, but if your sole goal is to write your own books, it's going to require a lot of work. And I think you should have I think that should be an ancillary goal. That's what I'm trying to say. And I'm going to come back to that too. Okay, last question. If you could only pick one goal for your book, what's that goal? And this is open-ended. You can couch it in terms of the 4 questions that we already covered. Or you can say something totally new. So have people outside my family and friends read it, even if just a few. To have it published and positioned to reach a thoughtful and critical target audience. Convey transformative moral virtue. To have people other than family buy my book. To be the best possible version of itself. Get it finished, published, and in the marketplace. To create a book for which I feel proud. I mean, if I'm allowed to say which one I like best, I think I like that one best. For some validation of my worth as a writer and or observer of life. Interesting. Good. I'm hoping, I didn't actually do this question for me. I'm hoping this helps you kind of really hone down to like your chief motivation for writing your book and getting it published. Because I think that can help you answer some of the other questions that we're talking about. Kind of prioritize them, put them in a different order and say, is this more important to me or is this more important to me? Based on what I just answered. So, to Jane, one more time, what is your primary goal for self-publishing that affects everything? It affects what advice I give you, it affects what service you choose, it affects how much money you spend, it affects the format, it affects how satisfied you are at the end of the process. And I think that's, what's your primary goal for traditional publishing? It's an important question to ask throughout the whole way. One of the last things I want to leave you with is a couple of people who, one, started in traditional publishing and went to self-publishing, and another one did the opposite. And I think the compare and contrast is pretty interesting. So this is Elizabeth S. Craig, and she wrote a post, "Why I'm Turning Down Trad Pub Deals." She makes more money writing independently. She gets to explore all of her rights and publish her book in a variety of formats or internationally. She can make changes to her self-published book. She can make changes to her profiles, the retailers and distributors. So it's talking about control. She can run promotions on books with lagging sales. She can devote all her time and best ideas to series that pay her best. She doesn't feel the need to prove anything. She has price control. She can choose her covers, and she can release books when I want. So it's a lot of the things we talked about at the beginning of the kind of control you can have with self-publishing. So let's contrast that with a guy who went from self-publishing and why he signed a traditional pub deal. So John Scalzi is a sci-fi writer. He was selling well into six figures, self-publishing. Every self-published author looked at him as a role model for what they wanted their career to be. Then he signed a traditional deal, and this was last year or the year before. It's fairly recent. And not just any deal, a 10-year, 13-book, $3.4 million deal. Would you take that?
Yeah.
I might take that. At first, that number is staggering and cause for huge celebration. But if you do some math on the deal, suddenly you start to wonder why he would sign away so many books over such a long period of time for such little money. And then Tim pulled some quotes from him, from Scalzi, about why he chose this path. "I like to write, and I don't mind marketing myself, but there is a whole lot more that goes into producing a book than just showing up with a manuscript and then telling people about it. I don't want to do any of the rest of that stuff. That's why publishers exist. That's what publishers do. As it happens, when it comes to science fiction, Tor, my traditional publisher, is as good as it gets in every department. They are better at these things I don't want to do than I am. I am delighted to partner with them and let them handle all that. I'm clearly making enough money." So it's really interesting, what different people choose just based on so many of these variables. I tried to distill this down, like if you're still having trouble deciding which path is for you, these are my suggestions based on a couple of questions. Based on like everything we've talked about. I wanted to give you what I would do based on these questions. We'll just get to it. If you want to release soon, self-publishing is, I think, better, if we're comparing them, self-publishing over traditional publishing. You can release sooner with self-publishing. Do you want to release well? Then maybe you should do traditional publishing because you have experts that are helping you. But that means you have to essentially get past the gatekeepers to get to those experts. Do you want to have full control? Self-publish. You don't lose any control. Do you want to have good help? That kind of goes to releasing well, traditionally published, but you lose control. Do you want to earn higher royalties? Self-publish. Do you want to earn in advance? Maybe the royalties aren't as important to you. Maybe you want to see how much of an advance you can get. Do traditional publishing. To reach your specific audience, you can do that through self-publishing, or to reach the most readers, you can do it through traditional publishing. So just the back and forth, there's so many questions you probably need to ask yourself after getting all this information. The final thing before we get into our Q&A, and this, it feels like the, I don't know, like the twist ending in an M. Night Shyamalan? I always feel like I'm saying it wrong. Movie where it's like, oh, it was all a dream. They were all dead. Whatever you choose, luck is going to play a role. I like this quote. I'm a great believer in luck. The harder I work, the more I seem to have. So if you put in the work to make the best book you can, and then whether you self-publish or traditionally publish, luck is going to play a factor. It's unfortunate, but it's just the way it is. I was going to include some anecdote of some guy that had been traditionally published. You know, his book came out, it did okay, but it wasn't until a year later that he was asked to present on some panel. I don't know if it was, I think it was televised, and he presented, and then, for whatever reason, that's what caused the book to take off. Had he not gotten that opportunity, his book probably would have just faltered out. And there's so many different stories like that. But he wouldn't have had that opportunity if he hadn't had the book out, if he hadn't already put on all that work. So yeah, that matters. So we're going to do the Q&A. What I'm going to do first, we've got about 20 minutes left. I did ask for some questions beforehand, so I'm going to answer those first since I got those in. Hopefully they're going to be quick questions, and then we can do some live Q&A. So, what is the best path or company to work with for self-publishing? Are the package offers a good route? Are any of the templates a good option? I think, judging by what I shared earlier, I wouldn't recommend any self-publishing companies. I would recommend seeking out your own, like freelancers for help. There are some websites like Reedsy has, lists that you can scroll through of editors and formatters. But I would also say, now that you know me, this isn't necessarily a pitch for me, but I do know people who do this kind of stuff. I know formatters and cover designers and editors. I think when you go with a self-publishing company, their intent is really to make money, whereas I think freelancers, at least the good ones, their intent is to help you put out the best book you can. And you can develop a better relationship with freelancers too, I think, especially if you're going to create multiple books over time, than you can with like a company who you may be working with somebody different every time you go back to them. And maybe, this is probably, I know I'm biased about all this, so I wouldn't recommend self-publishing companies or the package offers or necessarily the templates. I would recommend looking for qualified freelancers to help you. This kind of goes along with it. How do you determine the best editors, advisors, and cover creators to work with? I do a short talk about this. Essentially, I do with referrals, talk to other people who either write what you write, or just writers in writing groups that you know. Who do they use as editors? It's always, it's just like if you're hiring somebody to work on your house, you're going to trust somebody referred to you that, they've already had work done for them. And then if you contact, let's say like you contacted that editor and they said, well, I don't have time to do it in the time frame that you need it, then ask that editor who they would recommend. Because like I know a good number of editors that I would farm work out to. And I would, hopefully you can trust that person that one of your friends trusts. And then if you want a lot of, let's say you're looking for an editor, if you want a lot of editors to respond to you, if you go to b-efa.org, that's the Editorial Freelancers Association. You can post your editing need for free. And then, but the thing is I've heard you will likely get 100 responses. Because it's a national organization, so there are thousands of members, and if they're interested in helping you, you'll get a lot of responses. So you can spend a lot of time just weeding through all that and checking out all their websites. I know, that's where it gets difficult. That's why I always recommend try to go with people who are referred to you by other writers you know. What are the differences in the success of books published through traditional versus self? It's kind of a hard question to answer because there's not, nobody really tracks that. If you really want to get into nitty-gritty details, why did I just blank on that website? I knew I was going to do that. There's a website that tries to kind of figure that information out a little bit. But I would just go back to, I don't know, who asked this question? Can you further define what you were trying to look
Just
for?
the difference in, I guess, readership following, how successful are, not even money, not even monetarily, but the likelihood of getting it out there. Success, I guess, in numbers of books read, numbers of books bought.
Yeah. I would say, I would go back to, I guess, the quote I used earlier, that traditional publishing still dominates, but I think it's becoming less and less dominant. And there are statistics, it's on this website that I'm thinking of, that I can't remember the name of, it's bothering me. And they show, like, you know, of the top 10 Amazon books, 5 were self-published. So some of that information, I mean, you could even look this up yourself if you went to, like, say you go to your genre of choice on Amazon and you check their top 10 list and just see how many are self-published. And sometimes it's hard to tell because self-publishers can come up with their own imprint name if they want. So then you'd have to research that, and then it might be a dead end, you wouldn't really know. Sometimes it just says like CreateSpace as the publisher, and then that's how you can definitely know it's self-published. But it's hard to know. But I would say the traditional publishing hold is decreasing. And once I remember that website name, they have some really interesting graphs, that kind of stuff. We were talking about this earlier. Once you self-publish, how hard it is to transition to traditional. And I'm not sure if this question meant, you know, if I self-publish the Breaking Bad book, could I take that to a traditional publisher? I'll answer that question first. I could, unless it sold like 10,000 out of the gate, they probably wouldn't be interested. They wouldn't be interested unless it was really selling. And partially because it's already out there, you know. But they want to see sales first and foremost. So it's not out of the question because I think some of the success stories we talked about, you know, that's what happened with them. Self-published first, and then traditional publishers saw how popular it was becoming. They said, "Hey, we're interested in making money off that," essentially. But then in terms of like, if I self-publish this book, could I pitch another book to a traditional publisher? Sure. You know, I think knowing when you go through the self-publishing process, you learn about a lot, and then you have that experience to take with you. But really, I've also read that unless your self-published book has sold a lot, then like, sure, you can mention it in your proposal or in your query, but don't make a big deal out of it. Because again, they want to know how many you can sell. I think I have a few more questions here. Is it better to have a literary agent to navigate the publishing houses? Yes. Easy question. Especially if you want to get the big 5. Pretty much all of the big publishers require an agent because they're kind of like the first gatekeeper. So the agent kind of sifts out what they think publishers want to see. And pretty much publishers will not look at anything that is unagented. But then you can also look, I have to temper that with some smaller publishers don't need an agent, and they will tell you that on their website. Sometimes they'll even have like a manuscript submission form on the website. And then, oh man, how difficult is it to successfully market a self-published book? It's
another seminar.
It is. It really is, and it's not what I could lead because I'm not good at it. Like I would attend that one because I always feel like I could do better. And the problem is that you can do so many things, so many options these days to waste your time, waste your money, and sometimes you're like, well, I don't know if it's working. Is this thing working? Is this thing pushing the book? Is this thing selling the book? So I would say it is difficult. But here's the kicker: is that when you traditionally publish, it's just as difficult. You are still pretty much on the hook for selling as many books as you can as well. Like I said, you'll get some marketing help when your book releases, but if it doesn't start really doing well after that, you won't get much after that. And it makes sense. If you look at it from the publisher standpoint, they're going to invest their money in things that they know are going to sell. So that's why you see Stephen King everywhere and all the big name authors, because they know people are waiting to buy the book. All right. So, last question. We've got 15 minutes. I would ask. Let's post the question on here because I think that means I can refer to them later, which will help me know better what to cover next time, if I get to offer this again. And then whichever ones we don't get to, we can email about or things like that. If you have any questions, you might not have any. You might be fully confident in which path you're going to take now. Probably answer these before more come in. I took it down, but I'm afraid I won't be able to see all the questions in here. Oh, come on. There we go. There we go, I can scroll this way. Okay, is there value in creating my own imprint and taking a block of ISBN numbers? So by creating your own imprint, they mean, when you self-publish, you can essentially name your publishing company. I forgot what mine is because I've been using it so long. So I did @Words Press because I was trying to be clever at Words. And you can name it whatever you want. It's like, it's advisable because then, I added this, but when you look at this book online, it says published by. It says published by @Words Press. If you're looking at this, you might think, oh, that's a legitimate press. Instead of saying CreateSpace Digital Services or Kindle Direct, because that's an instant giveaway that you're self-published. So that could be worth it.
Wow.
Sorry, that was a text from the other Blake. Here, I'm gonna do what he told me, even though I forgot what day it's on. If you can mention my publication seminar next weekend, that would be great. So Blake actually does a really great publication seminar, and his is for essentially, like in his case, he got agents coming to him for his book, which is crazy. Like typically, you have to spend all your time going after agents, but he put in a lot of work beforehand to have agents coming after him for his traditional publishing deal. And so he's doing a seminar about that next week, which you should totally come to. I've heard it, and I was all like geared up. Yeah, I don't even have a book to write yet. So that's next week. Creating your own imprint, I would suggest it, and then taking a block of ISBNs, so you can, I can't remember because I haven't done it in a while, and CreateSpace changed it recently, but you can buy ISBNs through Amazon, through CreateSpace, and I think it's $100. And I think there's a free option as well that they provide one for you. And you might remember if you've researched it lately.
I haven't looked at the ISBN options through CreateSpace.
Okay. But so you can go through CreateSpace to get an ISBN, which you should have. But you can also buy a block through myidentifiers.org, I believe. And the blocks are like, I forget how many you get. 10 for $250,
Yeah,
something like that. Like if you're gonna self-publish multiple books, yes, buy the block. It's a lot cheaper. Like I bought the block because I knew I was gonna self-publish multiple books. And you also need an ISBN for your print edition. You need different ISBNs for different editions. Different formats, not editions. So I need an ISBN for my print book, for my EPUB, for my Mobi, I believe, for the audiobook, for the Spanish version. So that's 5 right there. So, yes, I think there is value in doing that, but only if you're going to self-publish multiple books or in multiple formats. For each genre, is there a better or worse option? For example, why is it better to have traditionally published or vice versa? I don't know the answer to that question. I want to say no, but it would be interesting to research, and maybe that's like what I said with you, is to research that genre's top 50 books even. Like, widen out your search. I'm assuming this was your question, Trevor.
Yeah,
we were asking
supposed to be
earlier.
is YA, so yeah, that's one of my questions.
No, that's okay. But I think you could do some like brief research and see if you can figure out what's self-published and what's not in your genre. Because I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head, but it would be interesting to look into. Does that help?
Yes, no, I mean, I wasn't sure. I didn't think there would probably be, but I was just curious.
That's a good question. Are there marketing companies for self-published authors? Yes. I mean, like PR firms you could hire, and they will. You could look into this. This could be a good one. I don't know how much they charge, but prbythebook.com is based out of Austin. I actually got to talk to their owner last year for a little while through a conference that I attended, and thank you. Thanks for coming. And they can be good, but I mean, I have not heard of many people who have hired PR companies that have gotten their return on investment. I don't want to downplay what they're capable of doing, but I think if you're already in a position with a healthy platform, that they could help multiply that. But I think I don't think they can necessarily help you establish that platform, unless you're willing to pay some big bucks. Do some writers submit only one chapter or short story at a time in order to get more readers through online? Can I ask you ask that question?
I've been reading Dickens and
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean,
I just wondered.
well, I guess my follow-up is, do you mean to sell it on Amazon or just to put it like on a blog?
I don't know. I don't attend any of these things, but years ago I did meet a lady who was writing a history book, and she told me she just puts a little bit at a time. I think that's where it all came from, but that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Maybe for her friends, or I don't know how she was doing it.
Yeah, like the,
Or she had a website, I think, that she did that.
Probably a blog.
Mm.
Yeah, I can see that being a very legit way of building your platform.
Yeah.
Right, is like blogging short stories,
Yeah.
or, you probably don't want to do, well, I mean, what was it, the example with Wool, right?
yeah.
But it started off with he was writing chapters, or Andy Weir, or one of those guys, right? Was chapters on a blog.
Yep.
And everybody's like, you should turn this into a book, right? And that's what they do.
Yeah, I think it's very helpful.
It's your intellectual property on a blog. You can take it, consolidate it, make a book out of it easily.
People do it on Amazon all the time. You'll
Yeah.
buy, it's not labeled as a chapter, but you end up with this book and you get to the end and it's like total cliffhanger. Not even like cliffhanger, I need to read the next book. It's like the very end, and you know that something
Yeah.
happened next, and you're like,
You're
even though
forced to
it's,
buy this.
yes, even though it's only like 99 cents, a lot of those are 99 cents, $1.99. You buy it and you get to the end and you're like, what? What?
Well, no, sell them as half episodes,
That's
like
like a
instead of
serial.
book 10, it's 10.5, right, for a
It's like a
serial.
Cruel.
Yeah.
It's cruel is what it is.
Yeah, well, and they get a lot of feedback on that. A lot of people will post, reviews on there. It's like, don't get this, it sucks you in, you have to buy like the next 28. And when you're buying 28 at $1.99
Yeah.
a pop, as a reader, you're like,
So you have to be careful with it.
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Reviews for really.
But I do think that publishing online can give you good feedback too, because you can see what people are finding or what they're interested in, and then you can maybe there's a short story you wrote that you posted online that keeps getting readers, and then you can be, well, maybe I should turn this into something more. So I think it's a healthy way. I think it's good if you can write every day, and maybe not everything I would say is worthy of turning into a book, so to speak. But then we can get into the whole conversation about like what's a book these days when you have
I created a
So many
blog
platforms.
just to and a commitment to do one blog a week, just to put it out, not the stuff in my book, but just other things.
Yeah.
To try to build more of a platform,
Yeah.
and to get people saying, oh, that was good, and then whenever I do get my book out, they'll go, well, that was really good, what you know, it's just good practice for me, I think.
So I don't know if you closed it, but I can't enter any more questions, so. I actually
Oh, I
have
guess I
one-
did.
I have one that's kind of out in the weeds a little bit.
That's all right.
If you're going to self-publishing route versus traditional publishing, do you think that author should form an LLC for legal liability reasons compared to the liability shield you might get from a traditional publishing contract?
Yeah.
What legal liability would come up on?
Well, if another author thought you were ripping off some of their work and they came after you, they said, I published something similar on my blog.
Or someone rips you off.
2 years ago, or someone rips you off, right?
Yeah.
But more protection of yourself, your own assets. Like, somebody comes after you and says, you're copying my work. Usually a traditional publishing contract will include they will provide some legal defense because they're going to do the research on existing work, right? So they're assuming that liability. And you're self-publishing, that liability all comes back to you, and if you don't have an LLC that's properly maintained, those people, if they win a judgment, can come against your personal assets. That's the question I'm asking. So
We have one for tax purposes. I can put all my writing expenses into the tax.
that's another good reason to do it, but I think that's regardless of whether you
But
do
it's small.
traditional or
Yeah, it's small.
self-publishing.
It's
Right?
not anything. It's not like I'm running a corporation.
It's like I said, it's a subtle question, but I think it's an important one.
It is, but I'm not a lawyer and I don't give legal advice.
I've read the article you're going to pull up, so.
Oh, I'm not going to pull up an article. I was just pulling up this website. A couple things. I have an LLC, but that's because I'm a full-time editor, author, writer. So part of me, in my non-legal advice, wants to say, unless this is going to be a full-time thing, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's an extra step that you don't necessarily need to do.
Right.
Like if I would have just put out this one book, self-published, that maybe a few thousand people have read, I'm not worried about it. If you really want to cover all your bases, then yeah, you should probably consider it and talk to people more knowledgeable than me about it. An alternative is the Authors Guild, authorsguild.org. I've heard about them before. I haven't actually looked into it that much, but they offer legal help, and it's a yearly, and it wasn't expensive either, and it's just part of what they offer. So that may or may not be kind of like the middle ground between not having anything versus having to do all this extra work that may not be fruitful or purposeful for you in the long run. So it's 6 o'clock and we actually got through all the information, which I was glad. Please email me if you have any further questions or, really anything. So like you're now part of the Writing Workshop Sales family, and we do want to help you. We want to see you succeed as writers. And then, yeah, so email anytime. You may need to do a quick thing like, hey, I was in your self-publishing seminar, just to remind me.
And you are going to send out some of the
Yeah,
presentation material and links?
Yeah, I'm going to
Okay.
aggregate all of it and do like a PDF and get that to you, hopefully by the end of this week.
Okay.
So that's it. And please leave a review if you can. I'll send an email tomorrow, but reviews definitely help us online. Yeah. Yes. Yes, I can try to remember to do that. Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
You're welcome, Trevor. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, see you too.
So what would you, like, somebody like me, I have, and I asked this,
How do I log out? I just know.
I have no credentials
You don't need to worry.
Okay.
to put behind my name, like editor or anything. And I would like to have that happen. What can you do to make yourself be more professional?
To what end? I don't. I'm not following quite yet.
Well, I've kind of been doing other
Thank you.
stuff and let it take I mean, anybody can say, oh, I edit books, but, I mean, I want to be taken seriously, and I feel like since I don't have any accredited, not necessarily, books, but anything that gives me credit in the writing community. I don't have anything.
So are you
Do you
trying?
understand what I'm saying?
I think so. So this is not in relation to your book or anything, right?
No.
Is it? This is in relation to you want to get into the field of editing.
Editing, whatever, I could be,
Okay.
It's fun, I will miss it.
I mean, I'm someone who believes in playing to your strengths. And I do want to be in the writing community, and I do want to be considered a professional. And a lot of people like yourself, you do editing and writing and things like that. So I mean, I just want to have something more professional.
It is, and Ellen is so great. Well, we don't around.
Oh, good,
Yeah.
good, that's great.
So, and she doesn't want anything to do with driving
I
around.
mean, I think it's
She's gonna
starting
go
to
to college in
something
Austin, so
other than
you're gonna want to go with that.
work in progress.
So, but
What year is
it's,
she? Is she like?
she's a sophomore, so.
Okay, she's got some time.
I mean, I think it depends on your end goals.
So, we're going
Um,
UT Austin and then UT Southwestern, so we'll see.
I will start.
Crazy, exciting stuff.
I guess
It is, it's
you go to
fun.
Blake's seminar next week.
It's fun.
Yeah.
I mean, part of it
I thought about that.
is building up that portfolio of things that you can show.
Oh,
That's really fair.
Very
If I had to
Busy,
pinpoint it.
productive
Yeah.
days.
And either that means finishing your thing and publishing it, getting it out there somehow, so other people can see what kind of writer you are. Or it's getting articles published. One of the best things I ever
Have you
did
lived in Midlothian
for
long
my
No,
editing
I-
business is
I teach in the
became a
high
monthly
school that
contributor
couldn't
to
come
the
to
writelife.com,
us, and so I went to
which,
Midlothian to teach.
thank you.
Oh, okay.
And people still find me because of those
No, I do
articles.
not.
I live in
like 12
Arlington
articles
and
over
I
the span of a
have
year.
family in Midlothian, so I thought you meant you lived there.
No, I just came from there and
Yeah.
it wasn't that
And
too
so-
long, and I thought,
and-
boy, I didn't even know it
And
was
that's,
too early.
yeah,
I
that's been
went
helpful.
to
And
years.
then,
Because I mean,
But there wasn't
I'm
much
just like,
traffic.
I need to, at this point,
That's good. Well,
stop,
you probably came up
start
67,
recouping some
right?
of my investment
Mhm.
and being able,
That's all.
Thanks,
you
Paul.
know,
Thank you. We'll be in touch.
Yes,
Tell Sarah I said hey.
I will.
you know, it is,
Okay, please do.
it
Thank you
is,
for coming.
it is a matter of, I wanna be taken more seriously, I guess, than what
Yeah.
just somebody who has.
You have to, you have to show proof.
Yeah,
And then do you have your own website?
no.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
part of it
what do
too.
I don't have anything to put on the website. I mean, that's, everybody's like, you need a website. I'm like, for what? I don't have anything to put on the
Yeah.
website.
Well, you could start writing, I mean, you could start writing
I don't wanna take up your free
things
time.
that, it's okay. I think it is. I guess we do have to get out of here. I forget that class is being right after us too.
Class. Oh, she was quite convinced, then that is important.
But yeah, I think it is about creating that portfolio
Yeah.
to start showing people what you're capable of doing.
Okay. I don't know that I would be a good editor, but, I'm a very supportive and encouraging person, but,
Yeah, that might not be good for
that's
everyone.
not gonna help me much, is it? Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Hope it's not raining anymore.
Oh, no, it's not, it's clear.